What is going on, everybody? I am John Scott. Welcome to the NHL free agency period here on Bleacher Report. My co-host today is Tim Wurzberger. We will be walking you through the first 2 hours of free agency, the 1 hour lead up to it, and then the 1 hour once the madness begins. I'm glad you're joining us here today. Tim, how you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. The rumors and the trades and all the signings the last couple of days has been a whirlwind leading up to this moment. I'm excited to see what happens today.
Yeah, I think obviously the big domino to fall was Mitch Marner coming into this free agency period. There's never really been a guy of his caliber at his age who could potentially be on the market. And all the lead up to this, with all the tampering allegations, Vegas Golden Knights, obviously at the deadline, will he go to Carolina? Will he go to Vegas? He declines all those trades. He wants to stay in Toronto with his wife, who is expecting. Everything comes to fruition last night. He gets traded to the Vegas Golden Knights, subsequently signs an 8 year, $96 million deal before the trade. So he's locked up long term, taking the biggest chip off of the pile of unrestricted free agents. Tim, what did you think of that deal before we get into all the other stuff that's happening? Because that was a huge seismic event last night.
Yeah, I mean a franchise altering event for both teams, even though it wasn't a surprise. I think we kind of knew that the move to Vegas was coming. Everyone was talking about it. He's a controversial player for a lot of reasons, but he's a talented one. And he's going to make that Vegas team, which is already really strong, that much stronger. And I think getting out of Toronto is a good thing for him. Although the problem with Toronto is you let a superstar in his prime walk for nothing, which is something had been saying for months at that point.
Well, not for nothing. They did get Nick Waugh. It's a not a terrible return for a guy who was about to walk in a few hours' time. So I think it's a win for Toronto. They locked up a lot of other players. They made some moves, and they get a good third, fourth line centerman who has shown he can win. He actually has Tim more goals in the playoffs than Mitch Marner does. So he does produce in the playoffs, and he produces when he needs to. But yeah, I think it's a great move by the Vegas Golden Knights early on. I don't know how this will age. You're a very old team, but yeah, smart move by the Knights. Great move by the Leafs to be able to get somebody. And it was a nice kind of parlay into the free agency period. And we're going to bring on now, probably, Tim, not probably, the biggest hockey insider on the planet. I call him a friend. I've known him for a long time. He's been on my show, and he breaks news. He is right on everything, and everybody loves him. Welcome to the show, our show, his show, Frank Seravalli. Frank, how you doing today?
Biggest hockey insider? Do you mean like
Oh,
physically the largest? Is that what we're going for here?
I will let you just take whatever you want from that comment, but I am taller than you are, so I will say that. But you're looking good. You're looking svelte. What do you mean big? You're looking fit, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, I don't know if fit or svelte would be words used to describe me, but I'm good. This is like Christmas morning here. This is my Super Bowl. So thrilled to be with you guys on the Bleacher Report app and this stream and this chat, because we've got a lot happening here, and just, stuff left and right. That hour last night, like I kind of needed paddles at the end of it to resuscitate me. We had like 7 massive transactions in a span of like 50 minutes, and I was out of breath, too much for one guy. And now that leads us into a most fascinating July 1 free agency day, where you've got still kind of the big four, but a lot of teams holding the bag because key quality players at positions that are needed to be filled aren't making it to market. And a lot of teams are wondering how exactly they're going to fill those holes, which means we certainly could see some more action on the trade front.
Oh, 100%. Yesterday was crazy, but let's talk about your most latest kind of announcement. Logan Stankoven, one of the big pieces going back to Carolina in the whole Rantanen trade. He just signed a long-term deal with the Carolina Hurricanes. Give us the info on that and your thoughts on this signing.
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, a key part of the transaction to send Mikko Rantanen to Dallas. And this is, look, there's two schools of thought when it comes to some of this RFA business getting done. A lot of guys we've seen, the trend has been to take shorter term 4 and 5 year deals, particularly at Stankoven's age, and cash in twice. With
Yep.
Stankoven, he clearly in this decision has made the choice to go for the long-term security. He gets $48 million to put in his pocket. And as a guy who's a little bit on the smaller end of the spectrum, is someone that is really happy to probably get that locked up and locked in. He's set for life now. And so that's huge. And it's even bigger for the Carolina Hurricanes because they have some big plans for him. And not only that, but if you look at their cap picture moving forward and you look at the prospects that are on the way for the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the deepest prospect pools in the league, they're going to be in a great spot to contend for years to come. I've said for a while now that Carolina's window is 10 years, and it might even be longer than that, with a chance to compete for a Stanley Cup. They've had some really good teams, but haven't quite gotten over the finish line, and Stankoven is going to be one of those pieces that they hope can help drag them there.
Yeah, they got to re-up Jackson Blake. Eventually, you think that happens soon. They have 2 first-rounders next year. So this is a team that obviously knows how to build for the future. You mentioned Stankoven because it is an interesting thing where you see a lot of these kids, they take the bag. They go for the big contracts. And you see GMs, Frank, that just, I don't want to say give in to the player, but they pay for the potential. A lot of the times it works out, but some of the times it doesn't. I was surprised at how small of a number this is. But then when you look at his numbers, the guy had 38 points last year, and that was really his first parlay into the NHL. Do you see this contract aging nicely, or do you see this being an okay contract for both player and team?
No, I think this is going to age really well for the Canes because you mentioned high water mark for him, 38 points, but still kind of just really getting his feet wet as a full-time NHL player. Now you put him on the upper end of Carolina's lineup, and they're probably planning for significantly better deployment and usage, that those numbers are likely going to double, if not next, this upcoming season, then the year after. And so what you're trying to do if you're the Canes, there's a little bit of a bet here, a little bit of a wager that, maybe in the short term, that Stankoven's going to have the better end of this deal, that particularly when you're buying a bunch of RFA years, that he's going to have an advantage in his court. But the question and the calculus for the Carolina Hurricanes is how much surplus value will they have toward the end of it? And I think that actually brings us, John and Tim, to an important reminder for everyone watching today, is that you're going to see numbers in free agency that are handed out that we're going to have to really think about rewiring our brains and how we consider and evaluate contracts. What does that mean? The salary cap this year was $88 million. Next season, 95. 2 years from now, we finally know from the NHL a look ahead that it's going to be 113. So in that very short period of time, the salary cap is increasing by almost 25%. So what you're going to see is and this is a great view of it here, that you're going to see this huge trend in terms of numbers going in an upward trajectory that players are going to be earning in cap hits. And so you're going to have to readjust your thought process of what is a good deal and what isn't, which then brings us back to Stankoven and the explanation that when you think about $6 million now, it might sound a little rich for a guy who's only had 38 points. But 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if he's even still just at 38 points and you're not even talking about the upside, this deal is going to look really, really good for the Canes. And he could be a significantly underpaid player in the NHL. And in his case, he ended up choosing the security, which I don't think you can ever go wrong with.
So, Frank, the big news last night obviously was Mitch Marner to the Las Vegas Golden Knights, and everyone's talking about the deal, and everyone's bringing up the word tampering. What's your understanding of how this deal came to be, and what's your thoughts on it?
Well, it's an interesting sort of allegation, so to speak, that came out through the media. And just adding some details here, I reported very early this morning. I'm actually looking at my tweet here. Jake Allen, I sent this at 5:17 a.m. Eastern time, was that the Devils had made progress on keeping goaltender Jake Allen in a Devils uniform, and sources indicate that he is going to be staying with the Devils and not making it to market. So interesting tidbit, and sorry for the diversion there. But when it comes to the tampering, I think this is something that is key, not just for the Marner and Toronto discussion, because a lot of people were thinking if the Vegas Golden Knights were originally talking about a 4-year deal for Mitch Marner, people were thinking 4 times 12. why would Toronto be giving up any assets? Or why would Vegas be giving up any assets to Toronto? There's no need, because there's no sign and trade, to send anything to Toronto's way to get those exclusive negotiating rights. So the thought process was, well, maybe Toronto's extorting or extracting an asset here from Vegas to say, look, we know that you've engaged in some conversation with our player over the last calendar year, whether it was a trade for Shea Theodore potentially a year ago, or even going back to this year's deadline in March. Sources indicate that the Toronto Maple Leafs, Carolina Hurricanes, and Vegas Golden Knights were very close on a three-way deal that would have sent Rantanen to Toronto and Marner to Vegas. And with that, not only was the belief that Mitch Marner would have agreed to the trade, but also that they would have been able to work out an extension and or maybe even have had one in place. So that's sort of where that tampering conversation begins. And then when you hear that Mitch Marner wouldn't engage in any conversation with the Leafs leading up to this, that I think that was something that obviously infringed or potentially would have infringed on Toronto's exclusive negotiating rights. So it's not just that, but also the fact that you'd be dealing with potentially a closed market system here. That would be to the downfall of everyone else in the market that wanted to talk to Mitch Marner. So that's one part of the tampering discussion. Here's the other part, which is the NHL has sent many warnings and in fact required all general managers and team presidents going back to the beginning of the season to sign a document acknowledging the tampering rules, in which they increased fines significantly and made it very clear that they will punish teams and also potentially the forfeiture of draft picks if they decide to tamper. So what does that mean with regards to free agency today? Last year at 1201, I had a list of like 40 deals that I could begin bombing out once that started. Today, it's been very quiet. And part of that is because everyone's afraid of this new tampering warning, which, by the way, they sent multiple reminders in the last week to teams. And beyond that, there's a bunch of teams and general managers mentioned this to me last night saying, look, we believe deals start getting bombed out there in the first few minutes of free agency, that the league is randomly just going to pluck one or two of them and investigate to try and dissuade teams from doing that in the future. So if you're going to see the market develop in a significant way, it's going to take a few hours today. I don't think you're going to see many deals completed in the first few minutes of free agency, which Tim and John, it's going to make the first hour of your stream at 12 o'clock maybe just a little bit more talkative, less action.
It ruins our action. And it's so funny that everybody plays the game. And I played, Frank, you've been around it forever. Tim's been around it. GMs talk to agents, players talk to GMs, players talk to agents. It's impossible to not. Everybody skates together in the summer. Everybody's around everybody else. So the idea of tampering and trying to lock down on that, it's been a part of the game forever. I'm sure Bobby Orr was trying to recruit players when he was playing. It's happened throughout time. So players get around it. GMs get around it. I know when they crack down on the fighting rule. Oh, you can't fight off the draw. Oh, okay. Well, we'll just wait 5 seconds and then we'll fight. And that's what we'll do. And then we can't get 2 penalties. We're only going to get 1. So now all these signings are going to start to come in at 12:45. And it's like,
or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, right, or whatever it is. And the problem with that is, John and Tim, is that as much as people would like to see and how as juicy as it would be for a tampering charge to be laid, the problem is every single team, as you mentioned, is guilty. So if you're not playing the game ahead of time, if you're not engaging in conversation at the combine 3-4 weeks ago in Buffalo about free agency, then you're behind. And as Ricky Bobby said, if you're not first, you're last. And so that's what teams are concerned about, is getting left in the dust if they actually play by the rules. And so when everyone's cheating, then no one's cheating.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on from this tampering. It's such a dirty topic, Frank. I feel disgusting. All right, you just tweeted out. I need to. I'm sweating. Jake Allen, arguably the greatest, the best option for a UFA goaltender, which is a very thin goaltending market. We obviously just saw Thatcher Demko sign, in my opinion, an astronomical number for Thatcher Demko at 8.5 over 3 years. You just tweeted that Jake Allen is potentially, supposedly expected to re-sign with the New Jersey Devils, taking the best option for a goaltender off the market. What are you hearing from New Jersey and Jake Allen?
Still waiting on details on what this deal is. And by the way, I wanted to quibble with you though a little bit on an astronomical number for Thatcher Demko.
Okay. Oh, let's bring it.
Let's look at some of the other recent big name goalie deals that have been signed. And let's start with Igor Shesterkin at 11.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Shesterkin is a guy that is a Vezina caliber goalie, but Thatcher Demko has recently been a finalist. And when he's at his best and at his healthiest, he is very clearly one of the 5 to 7 truly dependable goalies in the league. So with that, how do you reconcile what this new salary cap picture that we just talked about, this new marketplace looks like, and increasing goalie pay with Thatcher Demko, who, yes, has been injured? I think that deal falls perfectly into this new scheme, and it's Connor Hellebuck, oddly enough, that's the outlier here, that signed his deal kind of before these other ones got done, with the exception of Bobrovsky, that this Demko deal is just way more in line with the pecking order with some of the guys at the top of the chart.
Yeah, I guess the thing that stands out, the outlier, is the injury history and the potential, and if he's healthy. Because if he's healthy and he's on his game, yeah, I'm fine with it. But I've always been of the ilk where you don't spend a ton of money on the goaltending position. Yeah, it helps, and it's great to have a Bobrovsky or a Shesterkin or a Demko, but you can win without those star goaltenders. I think the Edmonton Oilers would like to have a talk with me potentially, but it just seems like a lot of money for a guy who's maybe going to be injured. And the future there is unknown. Maybe that's why they only give him a 3-year deal, but I was shocked at 8.5. I really, really was shocked. The Vancouver Canucks, in my eyes, they're an interesting team. They really, really are. Getting Evander Kane, re-signing Thatcher Demko, trying to just not rebuild, but more of a retool. What's Elias Pettersson doing? I just don't know. Quinn Hughes, is he going to stay? There's such an enigma of a team where they just filter talent in and out of that team so quickly. And they're very, very fascinating. Tim,
hey, I have some details here.
Oh, go ahead, Frank. Let's hear it.
Details on the Jake Allen deal. So it's an interesting structure. It is going to be 5 years times 1.8 million for Jake Allen to stay in New Jersey.
34 years old. 5 years puts him to 39 years old. Going to be potentially the starter after Markstrom leaves, or is he now locked in for a backup position? You would think at that number for the next 5 years. But what do you think? You like this deal, Frank?
I do. It's a little bit different. I think the truth is that the Devils wanted to try and save as much cap space as possible because they wanted to try and be a player, particularly up front, to add either more scoring and or probably a bit of a physical edge to their team. Their defense is kind of more or less set, but they clearly needed someone to play with Markstrom, and Markstrom and Allen had a good thing going last year. So the fact that you can keep that, and yeah, the term is probably a little bit more than you want, but I think if goalie is maybe one position that you could stretch a little bit on age, that this is a very reasonable number. I think Jake Allen probably could have got something like 2 years times 5. So, or certainly 2 times 4.5. So he gets kind of a similar total dollar figure. It's almost like the goalie version of the Brad Marchand deal, in which you take obviously the typical pile of money that Marchand was trying to get, $31.5 million or something like that, and you just spread it out into more term. They kind of did the same thing with Allen. You tell us what you're looking for in dollars, we'll get a deal done.
Is this a case of where he's just going to hang on in the roster till he's 38, 39 years old, or is he looking to retire? I don't know how that works, because you can't expect, I don't know, I guess Jonathan Quick is hanging around and James Reimer's still hanging around, but yes, the terms for him and
goalie's
Marchand,
the one position that you can do it.
All right, and look at all the needs here for buyers for goaltenders. What does this do now? I mentioned James Reimer. The goaltending market is pretty much done now with Allen being off the market. What do you think these teams are going to do? Well, it's not true, but
in terms of top-end quality, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think all these teams do? What is Calgary going to do? What is Edmonton going to do? Florida, they figured out their situation. Detroit figured out their situation. Do you think Edmonton, the Stanley Cup loser for the last 2 years, do they stick with Skinner and Picard? Do you see them going out and trying to get an upgrade somewhere?
They're definitely trying to get an upgrade. It's going to have to be on the trade front. I don't think that they're going to stretch and try and sign someone that's on the lower end just to be the third guy. I don't think that's part of their game plan. But to mention some of the other guys that are out there in terms of the market today, Georgiev, Vanacek, Anton Forsberg, Dan Vladar, Ilya Samsonov, David Riddick. You mentioned James Reimer, Capo Kakinen, and Alex Lyon. That's where I would kind of draw the line at the, sort of clear NHL goalies.
Yeah.
And then if we throw the board back up there that has some of those vacancies, we've got a couple of those settled already to this point. Just mentioned Jake Allen. Ottawa brought in, or they re-signed Levi Meralainen. He's their guy. When it comes to Montreal, a lot of people are surprised. Why would you have Montreal on this list? The reason that they did not bring Caden Primo back is that they are planning to have Dobesh play in Laval this year as the starter.
Really?
And they'd like to get him a whack of games and bring in someone that's an NHL vet, if possible, to play behind Sam Montembeault. So we talked about the Oilers. Florida has Daniil Tarasov that they acquired from Columbus. Detroit got John Gibson. Calgary, they're the team that I think is interested in Ivan Prosvetov, who I tweeted about earlier today. He played in the KHL last season and had fantastic numbers, 24 games of NHL experience. He's a guy that a couple teams are, sort of looking at as a interesting depth option. So that leaves the Flyers. What are they doing? It seems like the whispers were that the Flyers were on track to get a goalie, obviously not on the trade front. San Jose, I think the speculation league-wide has been that they are going to bring in Dan Vladar, who has the same agent as their other guy in Yaroslav Askarov. And then that leaves you Utah. And the speculation has been that Utah is going to be eyeing up or targeting Anton Forsberg. But look, there's a lot of moving parts to this because there was some thought yesterday that Vitek Vanacek might be going back to New Jersey. It goes to show you how quickly things move on the goalie market because Allen decides to stay. And now there's this sort of ripple effect that comes after that.
Crazy, Frank. Well, listen, I know you got to go probably plug your phone in and get all your other devices up and running because it's going to be a wild next couple hours for you. Thank you for jumping on, giving us a nice recap. We'll talk to you in a little bit once free agency starts. So go get some rest, take a little potty break, and we'll talk to you later, man.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Frank. Holy hell, Frank Seravalli. What, like, just a wealth of information. Do you just imagine his brain for the draft and then now? It's crazy.
He tweeted like 9 times during that conversation. Like, it's crazy. I'm watching him talk to you and then seeing his tweets come up on the feed because I know he's kind of eyeing his phone. It's amazing to watch. The pros that are at the top of their game like that, it's pretty cool.
It's their time. Like you said, it's Christmas. I did a July 1st hit in Toronto at TSN a few years ago, and it's amazing all the stuff that goes into the whole broadcast. And Bleacher Report, you have to commend them bringing in Frank Seravalli. He's the guy. He's Pierre LeBrun, he's Bob McKenzie, all wrapped into one. So we'll talk to him a little bit later. But Tim, let's just recap some of the moves that happened yesterday because teams were making moves, and this is what's happening. I think more common in the last 3-4 years. In years past, you would see all these free agents. It would be exciting. Teams are not waiting till July 1st. And you look at a team like the Florida Panthers, win the Stanley Cup, coming into free agency. What are they going to do? Because you see teams all throughout history, you win the Stanley Cup, and then they just hemorrhage their roster. Guys who win cups, they get big contracts elsewhere. It happened to the Blackhawks. It happened to the Lightning. It happened to the Avalanche. They win, and then the guys go get a payday elsewhere. The Florida Panthers are bucking the trend. They have just re-signed him. All 12 starting forwards who were on the Stanley Cup roster. And I could be wrong in the back end, but I think they have 4 or 5 of the defensemen locked up. The 2 big names that just happened yesterday are their captain, Aaron Ekblad, and then everybody's favorite, Brad Marchand. They both locked up long-term. You can see here on the screen, Ekblad, 8 years, $6.1 million, and Marchand, 6 years, $5.25 million. How does Bill Zito do this? How is
It's
he able
crazy.
to get this team back? It's crazy.
Yeah, well, not the captain. He's his alternate captain, Aaron Ekblad. But yeah, he's it's crazy because we kind of thought, okay, there were the big three pieces in addition to some of the other pieces I don't want to skip over. Like Nosek just signed this morning, but
Yep.
Ekblad, Marchand, and Bennett. Bennett signed last week, and that was their biggest priority, obviously. And that was the one that was like least questionable. That was like a when, not if that happens. And then you have Ekblad, who the report was that they wanted him to take less money than, and that's not something you typically see for a defenseman who's playing in his prime at the peak of his career. He wants to go make a boatload, especially now that he's finally got a ring, let alone two. And then Marchand, who just fits in so well. And you think, okay, most likely Bennett comes back. And then Ekblad is probably the odd man out. The defense market is so thin right now, especially those right shot defensemen. There's so
Yep.
many teams that covet that. And Ekblad is one of those guys. He's kind of like a Petrangelo, where he doesn't exceed one area, but he does a lot of things very well, and he doesn't really have any weaknesses. And obviously, he's a yeah, so it's really cool to see how that's come through. And then Bill Zito just bring Marchand back. And the 6 years is kind of a strange one. I don't know what they're expecting from him 5, 6 years from now, but I think you have to expect they're going to be playing in the Stanley Cup at least one or two times the next 3, 4 years.
Yeah, talk about building a dynasty. If they didn't already have one, they've been to three straight Stanley Cup finals. They've won the last two. And look at this roster that's signed through 2030. 2030 is 5 years from now, everybody. It's everybody on their team who makes a difference. It's fantastic. And you talk about hometown discount, what always is bandied about with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Guys coming home, we got John Tavares to a hometown discount. Every one of these guys, maybe with the exception of Sam Bennett. I think Sam Bennett signed to market. I think $8 million is where he belongs. But you look at a Barkov, a Kachuk, the Reinhardt, the Verhaeghe, the Marchand, even guys lower on the roster, the Luosterainen and the Lundells. Seth Jones, I know he's got traded over and didn't sign here, but Ekblad, Forsling, they all would make a ton more elsewhere, Tim. And it just goes to show you that when you build a good environment, when you build a player friendly, player positive team and organization, players want to play there. And if you're a free agent, you're looking at the Panthers signing all these guys, re-signing them, excuse me, and you go, damn it, I want to go there. Now there's no spot. I guarantee you, Corey Perry or Jonathan Drouin or all the upper, higher end, older free agents, and their agents are, calling around to the teams and saying, are you interested? They tell their agent, call Florida right now. See if there's an option there for me on this roster because I want to go there. I want to play with these guys. I want to win. And so that's why Aaron Ekblad re-signed there. The guy could have made $9 million in the open market. Easy.
For sure. And you think about all the little glimpses we've gotten into the Florida culture in the last month or two. The Dairy Queen stuff. You had that clip of Paul Maurice putting his fourth line out for the final moments of the cup to give them that special chance to throw their gloves in the air and be on the ice. And then even the way that they did like the guys, the bench players and the scratch players, they were the first ones to lift the cup because everyone else had already did it last year. So there's such a great culture to your point there. So yeah, Florida, what they're doing is special. So let's talk about some of the other players who are on the market and some of the potential landing spots for them because it's still, we talk about it's a thinner class, it's not a deep free agent class, but there's still a lot of talented players there. So who are the names that stand out to you and where do you think they go?
Well, let's play GM a little bit. I think it's fun, and I think everybody listening, everybody watching, that's what you do. You sit back and you go, gosh, if I was the GM of this team, how much would I give this player? So let's just start right here, Tim. Probably now that Mitch Marner is off the market, Nicola Ehlers from the Winnipeg Jets. He is going to be a free agent in 29 minutes. He will be on a new team in an hour and a half because they can't sign him right at 12. I'm sure he's already got his contract locked up. If you're the GM, Tim, of a team that wants to get him, what's your number? What would you be willing to pay for this guy? Because I love myself some Ehlers.
Yeah, I do too. He's one of those underrated players, especially like I know he plays in a big Canadian market, but he's not one of those household names in the hockey world where if you're a Carolina fan or a Dallas fan, maybe the Ehlers just isn't as sexy of a name as some of the other. And he's played behind like a Scheifele and Kyle Connor, and you look at his numbers, and he's just quietly very, very productive. And I think he's more consistent than anything. Where you just know you look, he's going to get 22 to on the low end to 35 goals like every single year. He always delivers. He's not like a someone that requires a lot of attention or drama. He just quietly does his thing year in and year out. And there's something about that that feels very compelling to me for Carolina. I think Carolina would be a great fit for Nikolai Ehlers. You look at some of the names they brought in over the past couple of years, Jake Gensel, right? Mikko Rantanen, some other names that probably haven't quite worked out, and they're still looking for that guy to fit in long term with the Ahos, with the Jarvises, with the Svechnikovs of the world. I think Ehlers would be a great fit there. And they have plenty of cap space. They have their core locked up. And I think he's going to get a lot of money. He's potentially looking $8-9 million, and depending on the term. But I think he's going to go max term. I think he wants the payday. I think he's going to want 8 years, and I think 8.5 is probably going to be his number.
So you think he can only sign a 7 unless he goes back to Winnipeg. So you're thinking 7 years, $8.5 million for Ehlers?
Yeah, I think it's probably on the high end. But again, he's an unrestricted free agent scoring winger in a year where there's not many of them.
Tim, his career high in points is 64. So I do, and maybe that was because, like you mentioned, he's playing behind a Scheifele, he's playing behind a Connors. He is the third, fourth option on that team. If he gets 8.5, that's a hell of a deal for him. But he might, because the market is so thin.
Well, don't forget what Frank said too about the cap going up. Like we're going to have to adjust our expectations where it's not going to be like the last 2, 3, 4 off-season free agency periods have been relatively stagnant with small increases. So yeah, I like this.
All right, we're going to bring in Frank. He just whispered in my ear ever so sweetly that he has something. So Frank, what do you got for us? Big news? Did Ehlers re-sign with Winnipeg?
Certain, but I can give you some details on a trade. The Edmonton Oilers are moving forward Victor Arvidsson to the Boston Bruins in exchange for a 2027 fifth-round pick. This is a pure salary dump by Edmonton. They were trying to move on from the last year of Arvidsson's deal. He wasn't quite a fit, wasn't very productive for them in the postseason, and an important time of year for Arvidsson to get right with a team with some opportunity because he's entering a contract year and wants to try and cash in next year. So he goes to Boston, where they're kind of reimagining and reinventing their roster. He also has a connection, having played for Marco Sturm during his time in LA. He's, of course, the new Boston Bruins coach. And so the Oilers also get it done before free agency opens. They were thinking they might have to wait a couple days for teams to look at Arvidsson as a check down option on the market, but you see that this market has dried up pretty quickly, and teams are like, we'd much rather 1 year of Arvidsson at $4 million as opposed to having to go out and overspend on the market today. So a win-win for both sides, not a return for Edmonton really, but to get that money off of their books before 12 noon kicks in to give themselves some clarity and flexibility is a big deal for the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, not a bad move for both teams. It's obviously low risk for the Boston Bruins. You give up a fifth rounder, and Arvidsson could potentially fit in on that second or first line if he pans out good. The guy was a good player. He obviously has had a couple down years last year with Edmonton, and he didn't really play too good with the LA Kings for the couple of years he was there. But good move by the Oilers, freeing up space. Does this mean, obviously they fit Bouchard under the cap, Draisaitl's cap hit is kicking in. The elephant in the room is Connor McDavid. Stan Bowman touched on it. It's not. Is
today,
it the massive? Not today, but it will be tomorrow. The mammoth, the behemoth for the Edmonton Oilers is re-signing this guy. Are they even broaching that subject in the next week or 2 weeks, or are they just going to let that one sit?
No, they've been broaching it. It's been talked about for sure. Stan Bowman spent a few days in Ontario with Connor McDavid and his family maybe a week or so ago to kind of really get those conversations going in earnest. But today, I'm not expecting a Connor McDavid contract extension announcement. However, the elephant in the room for the next 24 minutes is, are the Edmonton Oilers finding a way to keep Corey Perry, the 40-year-old, 19 goals last season and was massive in the playoffs? The list of teams that are interested in talking to Corey Perry today, let me see if I can pull it up and give it to you, because you're not going to be shocked, but Toronto, Los Angeles, Winnipeg, Carolina, Washington, Dallas, Philadelphia. There's other teams out there that want to have him come in and be the mentor. This is a guy that's in demand. He wants to be an Edmonton Oiler. He wants to go back to a third straight Stanley Cup final, wants a chance to win it this time with Edmonton, wants to finish the job. We'll see if the Oilers, now having moved out Arvidsson, can get a deal done with Perry before he becomes a true free agent.
Well, what's his number? Because last year he signed with Edmonton $1.15 The year before, he was at 775. Does he want a raise? Does he want to stand pat at that $1 million range with incentives? Like, what would it take to re-sign him at Edmonton?
Yeah, I think he's looking at a $1 million base salary deal with
Oh,
the potential to earn another 1.5 or more in bonuses, which obviously wouldn't apply this year if you're at the
yeah.
cap, would move over to next year, which is hugely beneficial for the team. So playing at a $1 million salary cap hit, it's not a crazy ask. Just the question for the Oilers, as one of their key goals that Stan Bowman stated, was to be faster. Obviously, Corey Perry's not bringing the speed. So that's one thing they're going to have to figure out. Are we going to go chase a couple guys that can fly, or does Perry, is he the guy that we want to keep to fit in with this group? So that's really what they're looking at this moment in time. Like I mentioned earlier this morning, door not closed on Perry in Edmonton.
Well, great stuff, Frank. Get out of here again. Check the phone. Arvidsson to the Bruins. Edmonton Oilers making moves. We appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, Tim, your Boston Bruins traded for Victor Arvidsson. You're a diehard Bruins fan. You have a tattoo on your lower back, which is really just eloquent and not too overstated. I really like it. What are your thoughts on this move by the Bruins?
Yeah, this one surprises me. Arvidsson, every time I hear his name, I think of when he was traded from Nashville to LA maybe 4 years ago. And Philippe Forsberg, who was his best friend, line mate, gave that big thumbs up on his Instagram story that he did not approve of the deal, and he got in a little bit of trouble for that. Arvidsson, he's one of those, kind of like an Eagler's light, you know. At his best, he's a pretty good role player, and he's a guy that has scored 20 plus goals in this league before, but didn't quite work out in LA, hasn't really fit in with Edmonton. So I'm hoping, you know, it's a low risk move, like you said. They didn't give up much to get him if you're Boston, a fifth round pick. $4 million is not a ton of money. You have that room. It's an expiring contract. So you can only upside here,
Yeah.
but my expectations are tempered. You know, I think you try him on the first line, see if he kind of builds any chemistry with Pasternak and whoever ends up that being the center on that line. But I think you expect him to be a second, third line guy and just, you know, he'll surprise you and, you know, have, if he touches 20 goals, great. If he scores a couple of big goals in big moments, great. But I don't expect him to be a main contributor on the offense at this point.
I think this is a great move by Don Sweeney. It's one of these buy low, sell high options because this guy's going to be traded at the deadline next year. Like, let's be honest. You
Not
bring
if the
him in.
Bruins are top three in their division.
Yeah, but they won't be. I think we all have to be realistic of where Boston is in their development, unless everything goes right. Lindholm comes back, and you got Zadorov and Swayman plays to his potential, and everybody ups their play. But they're not expected to compete. They missed the playoffs for the first time in 9 years. They sold everybody. Marchand, they got rid of. They got rid of all the defense. Like they traded everybody, Carlo and everybody. So this is a good play for them. They can trade him. They can re-sign him. He's going to be given every opportunity to succeed. But yeah, moving on, Tim, let's get back to the big board. The Oilers trading Arvidsson. What do you want to talk about next? There's a million things to talk about, Tim. Do you want to talk about back to the GM game? Because I got some players that I think are going to get some money.
There's a couple players here. One of the ones I want to talk about. This is one that's a kind of a polarizing player between you and I, and that's Jonathan Drouin. We heard the name yesterday that Drouin was quote unquote a McKinnon merchant, where he's like his stats are inflated because he's playing first line minutes with a guy that's driving all the offense, and maybe that's fair enough. But I think Jonathan Drouin is one of the more underrated scoring forwards in the league. I think he's produced a lot, and the whole thing with McKinnon just proves that he can produce if he's on the right line in the right situation. And I had kind of written in my notes this morning, maybe he's a fit for Edmonton. If he can be a McKinnon merchant, he can certainly be a McDavid one too. But they had no cap room, but they just shed $4 million, so maybe there's some room there. And I think what the thing with Drouin is he's not going to be many teams' first choice. I think he doesn't likely sign until after Ehlers signs and maybe even a Granlund and a Boeser, where like once those first dominoes hit, teams will go to their, you know, choice B, C and go with a guy like Drouin. I've also seen him linked to Carolina. I've seen him linked to Ottawa, and I've seen him linked to St. Louis. And I think those are all teams that would love to add a skilled top six forward to their roster.
Yeah, he's one of those frustrating talents where I remember playing against him when he was in Tampa Bay. And they sent him down to Syracuse and he was playing in the AHL and he was just like coasting, going through the motions. And I played against him in the NHL with the Lightning and he still was not really, putting in 100% effort, but he's got immense talent. He's got grade A skills. So if you do put him in a situation where he's motivated, I think that's the key part. Get him excited for the game. Get him wanting to go out there and get him, a good spot. He can be a productive player. A guy who doesn't need to be motivated. A guy who I skated with in the summer, Brock Boeser. We have the same agents. We went to it's called the John Scott Cup now in Minnesota, but it's Brock Boeser. He's going to get a new team. He's going to get a new deal. But before we get to him, the little whisper in my ear, my little buddy Frank Seravalli, he's got something else. Frank, what do you got for me?
Montreal Canadiens announcing that they've completed a trade with the St. Louis Blues. We have Zachary Bolduc going from St. Louis to Montreal, and defenseman Logan Mailloux going from Montreal to St. Louis. So interesting swap. The Montreal Canadiens defense is pretty stacked, and the addition of Noah Dobson probably left Logan Mailloux on the outside looking in. Needed to make a decision there. I think Montreal, sources indicate, have gone back and forth with the St. Louis Blues on a larger transaction involving Jordan Kyrou. That did not get across the finish line last night before Kyrou's full no trade clause kicked in at 12 midnight. But nonetheless, you could tell that these were kind of the beginning blocks or the germination of some of that conversation that includes, or concludes, I should say, with a Mailloux for Bolduc swap.
Yeah, obviously Mailloux, the controversial defenseman the Canadians picked in the first round a few years back, and then they're getting a good power forward in Zach Bolduc. I like this guy. He kind of had his coming out party last year, but great job, Frank. Thanks for the update. We appreciate it. We will get back to you soon. Keep them coming. I absolutely love seeing your face every couple minutes. All right, moving back to landing spots. I was talking about Brock Boeser, Tim. Now that's Marner's off the board, the best goal scorer, in my opinion, is Brock Boeser. I was saying I skated with this kid. I know he's got the release. He's got the intangibles. He is just an all-around good forward, and he's coming off a pretty decent career in Vancouver. I would say it's a little tumultuous. He got criticized every so often, maybe not scoring as much as he could, maybe not playing defense as much as he could, but all in all, the guy is a sniper. He's one of those point shoot players where you put him in a spot and he scores. And the thing about Brock is he's consistent, Tim. If you give him 10 shots, he's going to score 3 or 4 of them. He's not as good as the high-end snipers, but he doesn't get paid like a high-end sniper. So if I'm a GM and I'm looking at a Brock Boeser and I'm looking at a need, I need this guy to fill, he will fill that goal-scoring option, which desperately GMs need on the power play. The number I see for him, Tim, it's obviously going to be 7 years. I think it's around $6 to $7 million for him. I know people are going to be, he's going to make 8.5. When you look at his career, he sniffs 60, 70 points sometimes, but this is his sweet spot right here. 25 goals, 25 assists. That's where he lives. And if I'm a GM, I'm not going to overpay for that. I'm not going to go crazy. I think 6 to 7 is a good number for him. And honestly, where I would like to see him, he's a Minnesota boy. He's got roots there. He's got family there. He played college there. I would love to see him going to Minnesota. I would love to see him playing with Kirill Kaprizov. I would like to see him with Marco Rossi. And I want to see Brock Boeser on the right side. I think that would look really, really nice for the Minnesota Wild. They have a lot of cap space now. Obviously, the cap is going up, like Frank mentioned. They're getting out of cap hell. They're getting out of the Parise and Ryan Suter debacle when they bought out both of those guys. So my ideal landing spot for Brock Boeser is a Minnesota Wild. Tim, let's go back to you. Speaking of Marco Rossi, let's skip him for a little bit and go to Mikael Granlund. He was arguably one of the best pickups by the Dallas Stars. They got him from the San Jose Sharks when they were having injury issues. They needed to shore up their forward and defense. They get Granlund. They get Cody Ceci. Granlund played fantastic. He inflated his value throughout that season and then into the postseason, to the point now where he is one of the best options up front on a very thin open market. Where do you see Mikael Granlund landing, Tim, and for how much?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Dallas really wanted to keep him. They were talking to him as recently as last night, trying to make it work, but they just don't have the cap space to do it. So he is going to hit the market in about a half hour. And he's one of those guys, too. You look at what he did in San Jose, putting up numbers that had some nice young talent, obviously, but just not a team that scored a lot of goals, and yet he was producing. And he fit in really well with Dallas, and GM salivate over that, where you can see hey, I know that he can fit different systems. I know that he can play up and down the lineup. He can be a guy on given nights. They can put up 3 or 4 points when he's on. So I like him a lot. And I kind of think he's a domino that maybe falls after Ehlers and Boeser and the way that these things typically go. But he's going to get a call from a lot of teams. I think he probably wants, he's 33 years old. I think he wants a 4-year deal that'll take him to about 37. I don't think he gets like the Brad Marchand type deal where he's going to get the long term. I just don't think he's that kind of player. I don't think he has the ceiling for that. But I think he's going to get 4 years at $6.5 million. I think is probably a right number for him. And I've seen him linked to a lot of teams. But one team that I think would be a lot of fun that makes a lot of sense is the Utah Mammoth. We've seen the way that they traded for JJ Peterka. They want to get better. They were in on Brad Marchand until he resigned with Florida. So they want to get better. They want to accelerate their window. They have a lot of young players coming up right now, but they need to get better with some veteran guys in their lineup. I think Granlund would fit that really well.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that just seems to stand out when you're watching a game. And you look at it, there's superstars, there's guys who should jump out at you when you're watching the game, and it's always Granlund who's always in the mix. He was like Corey Perry for the Oilers, where it's like, holy hell, like he's always around the net, he's always in the middle of a play. And Mikael Granlund has consistently done that throughout his career, but he's never been rewarded with that long-term 8-year lock you in, you're my franchise guy type of contract. So it makes sense for him to get a decent size. 4 years is not a small amount, and that's a good number for him. All right, I'm going to move on to maybe the most coveted defenseman on the market, Vladislav Gavrikov for the LA Kings. He really kind of jumped to the forefront with the Drew Doughty injury. He played great, shoring up on that back end, and now he wants to cash in. And he's not going back to LA. He wants big money. He's seeing the money that's being thrown around. He's asking for north of $8 million, which in my eyes, that's a big number for a player like him. When you look at Columbus, they just re-signed Ivan Provorov for 8x8.5, and I think Provorov is a little bit better option on the back end. But like we're saying with everything else, the market is very thin. And when you look at the options on the back end for defensemen, it's Kylington, it's Brent Burns, it's Orlov. There's just not a lot there, especially younger guys like a Gavrikov who you can lock in for the next 6, 7, 8 years. They're at a premium. Like who you're going to get Cody Ceci, who's 31. You're going to go and get a Ryan Lindgren who's got more miles on him than a highway. Like there just isn't a large market there. And talk about tampering. There's already just warning flags going up that they already have a deal in place with him and the New York Rangers because what was I going to say? Because apparently the deal's already done, and as soon as 12 o'clock hits, he's going to sign this deal, but they won't do it until 3 o'clock. But my number for him, if I'm a Chris Drury, and I already have this number done, you would think it's around $8.59 million, right? Because he's going to be a free agent. That's where it will be. But if I'm a smart GM and this guy's on the market, I'm going to pay him 7 because that makes sense to me. But I will tell you right now, he's going to get 7 years, $8.5 million from the New York Rangers, and the Rangers desperately need him. When you look at this defense, they get rid of Lindgren. You have a great goaltender in Igor Shesterkin. You have high-end talent up front. And what was thought to be a strength on the back end with Adam Fox and Keandre Miller and Braden Schneider and Will Borgen, all of a sudden, it's been a weakness for him. Adam Fox has been injured. Keandre Miller has been exposed. You get rid of Ryan Lindgren because he's getting slow and old. You get rid of that contract. But bringing in Gavrikov, I think, obviously helps this defense, but does it make them a contender? Does it shore up this defense, especially at a number like that? I don't know, but it's a start. So my number, Tim, is 7 years, $8.5 million for Vladislav Gavrikov, and the spending is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. All right, who do we want to talk about next, Tim?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, sure. What do you got, Frank?
Gavrikov, everyone's been trying to figure out, hey, where's this going to go? How's it going to work? And, well, that's sort of been the asking price. LA Kings, you want to keep Vladislav Gavrikov? 7 years times $8 million. So you're right on the ball in terms of where that's, that general range of where it's likely to end up. I think the Kings had flirted with the idea of like, could we maybe move it around and make it 8 years and $7 million? Same amount of money, just spread out over a longer period of time. That I don't think they ever really got that far because they want to try and reimagine their defense. They'd like to add vets on both the left and the right side, and that's going to be what they're after on the trade market if they don't get that in free agency today. But you're right. In a real short period of time, Vladislav Gavrikov kind of became the only top-end defenseman left on the market, and this all fell into his lap in such an amazing way that if this deal isn't done, that's been long rumored with the New York Rangers, he's going to have lots of options.
All right. Thank you, Frank. We appreciate that. We got to let you go again. Free agency is around the corner. We got 7 minutes until the clock ticks midnight, so we got a lot of stuff to get through. Tim, we went through Boeser, Gavrikov. Let's talk about some RFAs. Will Cooley from the New York Rangers, the aforementioned New York Rangers. Again, they get rid of Kreider. They're moving on with some vets on the back end. They're trying to revamp this team, trying to make JT Miller happy, trying to make Panarin happy. Will Cooley was maybe the one bright spot last year. Coming in, I think he was a third, fourth round pick. He had a fantastic season. He exceeded expectations. And the beautiful thing about him, he's a big body guy who throws his body around. He's not afraid to just mash and bash on a team that was a perimeter team. They were one of those just, dancing around East-West teams. He comes in and he just is punching guys in faces. That's what this team desperately needed. He's due for a contract. He's an RFA. I think Will Cooley, and you might think I'm crazy, I think he could be a Tom Wilson type. With how he plays, especially with the New York Rangers, that team loves that type of player. I played for the Rangers. I don't know if you know that, Tim, but I did. Had a cup of coffee there midway through my career. They love the Broad Street Bowlers. I remember Dan Girardi was with me. Every time he would make a hit, every time he would do something in defensive zone, there was this guttural roar at Madison Square Garden that just, you can't describe it. Every time I got in a fight there, which was once, the crowd loved it. And Will Cooley gives him that player. And he's coming off his entry-level contract. I think if I'm Drury, I got to go big. Because he's going to want a big number. I think he made $800,000 last year. You lock this guy up for 8 years and you try to get him at a team-friendly deal because you try to do a bridge deal for him and he continues his trajectory. In 3 years, instead of getting him for $5 million, you're going to have to pay him $9-10 million. So if I'm Drury, I am offering him, much like the Stankoven deal, where he gets 8 years for $6 million. I think for a Will Cooley, he's a little different player, obviously, than Stankoven. But in my eyes, the ceiling's way higher. I think he goes 8 years, $6.1 million, $6.2 million for Will Cooley. Even though he hasn't maybe shown the offensive touch, he does so much. When you look at Tom Wilson with the Washington Capitals, how he just impacts a game. He went from being that missile who would just fight and mix things up and just be causing havoc out there into like a scorer, first-line power play guy. Starting periods, ending periods, the defensive specialist, an offensive specialist. He, not so quietly, took over that team when Ovechkin started to slow down. TJ Oshie got injured. Backstrom was gone. Then it was Tom Wilson's team, and I think it still is. So Will Cooley, I think he has those intangibles. And they knocked it out of the park when they got that draft pick, and he started playing good this year, Tim.
Yeah, he's an interesting name. And the Rangers, one of the things that they've done very poorly in the last couple of years is not really grow and develop their young players. Like the Filipinos of the world, Lafreniere hasn't panned out. We saw Capo Caco shipped out of town. And a lot of those guys have go on to criticize the locker room and the culture and feel like they didn't get the chances they deserved. And usually when there's smoke, there's fire. So I hope that does work out. Let's talk about another player that I think is going to be one of the more interesting stories today and this summer, depending on how long this drags out. That's Marco Rossi from the Minnesota Wild. And I think if there's a guy that's primed for an offer sheet from another team, that could be Marco Rossi, because you could see, does he sign with the Minnesota Wild? Because apparently he was not happy with the fourth line minutes that he received during the playoffs. He wants a bigger role. He wants that 1C. He wants to be on the first power play again. He feels like he deserves that. Similar to what we heard with Martin Necas the last year or two. And so could we see him, if he wants out of town, if he doesn't feel like he's getting his due, could we see him traded? Could we see an offer sheet come in from another team after 12 o'clock here, just in a couple minutes? I think most likely he's going to stay. Where a couple days ago it seemed like he was for sure on his way out. Now it seems more and more likely that he's going to stay in Minnesota. The question for me is, does he get a max contract? Does he stay long term? Or do you think we see a bridge deal that we see with a lot of these young kids? He's 23 years old. Do we see that 3 or 4 year bridge deal to get him to that UFA status where he has all the power? Maybe he signs 3 years at $5 million, but then he gets the big ticket when he hits 26. What do you think happens there?
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting situation because players these days are so confident, right? And they know their worth and they aren't afraid to voice it. And they aren't afraid to let people know. And yeah, like you said, Tim, he wasn't happy with how he was thrown out there in the playoffs, getting demoted. Ryan Hartman getting first line minutes, and obviously Eriksson Ek getting bumped up in the lineup. And if I'm the Minnesota Wild, I don't know what to do with a guy like this because he is a talent. We take him in the first round a few years ago. He was a high draft pick for us. We want to keep him in the fold. But on the other side of the coin, do you want to deal with his attitude? And how is that going to progress long term if we get him in the lineup and he isn't producing and we have to send him, a message and go down to the third line? How is he going to respond to that? If I'm a GM and I'm a coach and I challenge you and I send you down to the third line or I bench you and I try to cut your minutes and this is how you respond? In the offseason, you complain and moan and say, I want more minutes. I want first line minutes. I want more money. I want to be paid like this guy, that guy, and the other. When you look at Rossi, he was given everything on a platter coming into his first 3 years. You get to play with a Kirill Kaprizov. You get to play with the Matt Zuccarello, who is one of the most underrated wingers in the NHL. The guy is so incredibly gifted and skilled. You play with the Matt Boldy. You get primo zone time, and you still complain. So I don't know. I think if I'm Billy Guerin, I got to be smart about this because he is a good NHL talent. Where he lines up for me is a second line centerman. And yeah, I think he resigns in Minnesota and he gets a decent team friendly deal, but you have to pay him because he's going to complain. I think he gets a 7 year or an 8 year, $7 million contract. It's overpaying now, but like Frank was saying, the cap's going up. He's getting long-term stability. The team's maybe overpaying for the first couple years. It's just like the Matt Boldy contract when they signed him. Everybody was kind of screaming, he hasn't done anything. What's going on? You're giving this guy a $7 million contract. He hasn't done anything. Fast forward a couple years. He got 31 goals. He got 29 goals. He got 27 goals. He played great in the Four Nations Cup, and now he's arguably on the cusp of being a superstar for these Minnesota Wild. So, yeah, I think they lock him up. But, gosh, a bad way to go about it if you're Marco Rossi.
Well, I think the Stankoven deal is a great reference point for him too. The fact that they went through just this morning, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a good comparable. Rossi's already a better player right now. We'll see who has the higher upside. Rossi had 60 points this past year to Stankoven's 38, I think you said. So we'll see. But we are now seconds away, and in fact, it's noon Eastern. Free agency is official, and Frank said a little while ago that we might see more delays, where typically deals start breaking this second, the next couple of minutes. And there was a graphic about all the money that was spent in the first 30 minutes of free agency last year. What's your sense on how things will develop this time around?
Well, I think GMs are definitely gun shy. Obviously, when Gary Bettman in the NHL comes out and they say, we're going to hammer it out on tampering, you don't submit your deals. So what's happening now is GMs and agents are putting ink to paper, but they won't submit the paperwork to the NHL probably, like Frank was saying, until 3 p.m. It's like they'll just sit on it. They'll have it in their cabinet on their pile, and that'll be it. Just like what you said. Last July, they spent $415 million on salaries from noon to 12:30. I bet you that number, Tim, will get cut by 80%. I bet you will see a couple of contracts coming in before 12:30, but all in all, they'll just wait because GMs aren't stupid. They don't want to be fined. They don't want to be whacked with potential penalties, and it's stupid by the NHL. It's like everybody knows the game. Everybody knows what's going to happen. So now they'll just wait, and there'll be just a barrage of contracts coming in at 3 p.m. It's like, well, what do you think happened? Do you think they all of a sudden just came together on a deal at 3 p.m.? So again, I don't understand the reasoning behind it. I get they don't want teams to tamper, and maybe if it's really egregious and it's out in the open and players and GMs and stuff are like when the Ottawa owner outright said, oh, we want this guy. He would look good with this, and with our jersey on. Then you whack a player, but tampering happens. If a player is going to be an unrestricted free agent, he will go where he's getting paid the most or where he wants to go. So I don't know. So for us, it stinks because we get to sit here for half an hour and talk about, well, we're waiting for the first contract to come in. They're already signed. They're sitting on desks somewhere. But in years past him, It was a barrage of deals when I was going through free agency. It was just like you're staring at your phone. I'm texting my agent. Okay, what's going on? He would text me or call me and say, hey, I have this team, this team, this team, and this team. And then you have to start negotiating there. It was a lot of fun. But, anyways, let's bring Frank on. His phone must be blowing up and catching on fire. Frank, are you ready for what's going to happen here in the next 3-4 hours?
Of course I'm ready, but I just wanted to chime in on the Marco Rossi conversation.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
they're not going to be signing him to a long-term deal. They don't
Ooh.
have any interest in that. They view Marco Rossi as a guy that obviously has a ton of talent, but with the undersized nature that he has, they see him as more of a third line center on a really good team, on a cup contending team. Here's the issue that they've run into is they haven't gotten good offers for current roster players. Teams have thrown futures at them. The Vancouver Canucks put a mid-first round pick on the table. Lots of teams have tried to send prospects their way. The Wild aren't in the business of making their team any worse for this upcoming season. And so if they don't get a quality offer to change out a forward for this team in exchange for Marco Rossi, what they're going to do is go back to him and offer him a real short-term bridge deal on a higher AAV to just keep him in the lineup. And that's sort of the crossroads. Billy Guerin's going to have to go back and have an uncomfortable conversation after the player's been out there in trade talks for so long and they've kind of made it known that he's not a perfect fit for them. But just wanted to properly set expectations. There is no long-term deal coming for Rossi in Minnesota. That's not the thought process they're thinking.
Well, where do you think that number is if they can't find a trade partner? Because the agent maybe knows they have him over a barrel a little bit where you can't get rid of me, but my player is good enough to get a number. Is it a 2-3 year deal for him or is it a 1 year deal? Where do you think that deal falls?
My assumption would be that it would be like a 2-year deal in the $5.5 million range. There's not a ton of leverage on his part, maybe 6 you could stretch to, but he doesn't have arbitration rights. The only thing you could do today is offer sheet him, which I don't know why a team would want to go absolutely crazy in an AAV to offer sheet him to mess up their own cap when they could just probably make a deal with Minnesota.
All right, Frank, that sounds great. Thank you, and we'll be getting to you soon. Obviously, the deals are going to come in. We appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
So, John, let me ask you. It's July 1st. It's noon. Free agency is just starting. You went through this a few times in your career.
Too many times.
I know that you have a lot of buddies that did too. What's this day like for the players, specifically right now? Are they sitting by their phone at a desk in a quiet room in their house? Are they distracted? Are they out with their families? What's the experience like right now?
Well, for me, it was distract, because I think we were talking earlier, Tim. GMs and agents want to get the big tickets done early. You know, if you're sitting on a high-end free agent, if you're sitting on a Nikolai Ehlers or a Brock Boeser, that's who you're prioritizing. So you're immediately calling all the GMs who you think you're interested in your player, and you're working up deals. You're trying to work up a market. You're talking to St. Louis, you're talking to Tampa, you're talking to Chicago. You're going, this team's offering this much. What can you do? And then you roll around and you get to the lesser known players, which was me. So that's why I think I signed on July 1st twice. I signed on July 2nd 2 times as well. Then I stretched it my last year until July 7th, just because the market needed to kind of work itself out. But yeah, it's definitely a situation where you try to distract yourself. You try to just take your mind off what's happening, because for me, I didn't know if I was going to get a contract every single year. And this is what's happening to a lot of these guys. You look at the market and what's out there, especially, the goaltenders, the defensemen. It's a lot of older guys like Eric Johnson and TJ Brody and Brent Burns and Tyson Berry and Jeff Petrie and Klingberg and Nate Schmidt. Well, Nate Schmidt will get a job, but a lot of the times you don't know if you're going to be playing the NHL next year. Right. And that's the cold, hard truth of it. And so you're just sitting there going, like, what do I do? I might have to figure out a plan B, which I don't want to. And that happened to me a few times where I'm sitting there staring at my wife, looking at my kids going, what the hell, man? Like, maybe I don't sign. So it's definitely a trying couple of hours, if not days. But we got a signing here. We'll get to it in a second. But Tim, what is the signing here? First one coming in. I got a little birdie in my ear telling me we got a signing. Noah Juleson, he's going where? The Philadelphia Flyers have signed Noah Juleson. Tim, very small one, But to kick off our free agency period, the Philadelphia Flyers, Danny Briere making waves in the draft, kind of trading up to get someone who he could have got maybe in the second round, making the first dip into free agency, gets defenseman Noah Juleson, a small deal. Tim, does this even have an impact on the Philadelphia Flyers? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
Not a huge hockey impact right away, but this fits in the larger picture that we talked about at the draft the other night. That Danny Briere is quiet, or maybe not so quietly, gotten rid of a lot of the guys that weren't his guys. He's got a new vision for the team that doesn't fit whatever the prior GM was doing, and he's like, okay, I'm shipping guys out of town. I'm bringing in new talent. I'm kind of getting worse in the short term to build something that we haven't really built. The Philadelphia Flyers haven't developed really an identity yet, and I think they did. They started doing that the other night with the guy they took in the draft and some of the moves they make. And I expect more to come where you're going to see Briere go out and get his guys. And this is one of them. It's a small move, but I think it's a culture move. It's the beginning of new Philadelphia Flyers that hopefully we'll see them, competing for a playoff spot sooner than later.
yeah, I agree. And they just they're not going to compete for a long time. So it's very
Well,
funny.
John, they were in the playoff hunt for a lot of the
Yeah, I
season
know,
last year.
but it was a huge shock, and everybody was
Yeah.
surprised. And then the last month of the season, they fell off. They bring in Trevor Zegras, obviously. They got a new head coach in Rick Tocchet. They will be good, but they won't be. And I should preface this: they might be in the bubble hunt. They might be there at the end. They're not a Stanley Cup contender for a long time. They have a lot of work to do with this roster. I like obviously the young players they have. They got that young Russian Michkov who's going to be a superstar in this league, but they're a ways away. So they're not going to sign players long term, in my opinion, unless they're high impact, big, star players who will be good for this team long term. They're going to sign 1-2 year deals just to get them to that window where they're going to be competing. If you're in the chat, let us know. We want to hear from you. We'll answer your questions before we get some big deals coming in. But Tim, let's backtrack a little bit. Talking about big trades. The Montreal Canadiens went out and got arguably, which would have been the biggest RFA in the market, Noah Dobson, a couple days ago. They gave up two first-round picks. They re-signed Dobson to a huge new deal. They pair him up with Lane Hudson. Now there's rumblings in Montreal. They're going to get rid of Mike Matheson. They made a push for Jordan Kyrou that didn't come to fruition. With the addition of Dobson, you get Lane Hudson. Now you keep a Matheson. They just traded Logan Mailloux because Frank was saying their back end is crowded because they have a lot of good NHL talent. With the addition of him, Tim, obviously they made some strides last year. They had a good season. Martin St. Louis has these guys playing good. Is this a playoff team now, Tim?
It's funny because I was asked yesterday if I wasn't a Bruins fan, I had to start a fandom over what team would I pick. And I think the Montreal Canadiens were pretty high up on my list, which is sort of sacrilege for the people of Boston. But you look at this roster, you look at the age, you look at the talent, what they've done in such a short time. There have been so many teams who have had to try to go through rebuilds in the last 5-10 years that tried to do exactly this, what you're seeing on the screen, and just haven't been able to do it. A lot of it has to do with luck and just hitting on your draft picks. A lot of it has to do with development of players, certainly, like you see with a guy like Nick Suzuki. But this is such an exciting young team, and I think they're going to be a playoff team probably, yeah, the next 5-10 years. I think they're set up for very long-term success. They have their goalie, they have their defense, they have their forwards, they have their depth players. Like, there's just so much talent, and there's so much talent that you don't need to hit on all of them. Like Slavkovsky, maybe he's the next great power forward in this league. Maybe he's a complementary player. Maybe he tops out as a Josh Anderson type, and he's a role player, and that's okay because you're still going to hit on Demidov and a Suzuki and a Reinbacker. So like, there's so many good players on this team. There's a lot of things that you can be excited about.
We just had a question in the chat. Which defenseman should the Detroit Red Wings go after? And I think if you're the Red Wings, you had a couple big needs coming into this offseason. One was goaltender, and Steve Yzerman knocked it out of the park. You go and get John Gibson. He immediately shores up this goaltending situation. Cam Talbot played great last year, but he's 37 years old, and for him to duplicate that season, that would be something else. So you bring in Gibson, who is a huge upgrade over Cam Talbot. And on the back end, you got Mo Seider, you got Arvidsson, obviously, who are two studs, stars in the making. If not, they already are stars with Seider. And then after that, it drops off pretty dramatically. You got Ben Straw, you got Justin Hall, you got Gustafsson, Jeff Petrie when he's healthy. It's a slow defense that isn't really made for the typical NHL. When you look at the free agent market on the back end, there's not a lot there. Unfortunately, there isn't a guy who you can say, I'm going to give him $6-7 million and he will play on my core four for the next 7 years. And he'll be an impact player, and he's going to put up 30, 40, 50 points. There just aren't those guys because GMs don't let them hit the open market. GMs are smart. They realize what wins championships. What's up, Tim?
No, I'm agreeing. I was thinking it would be nice if they could go get a Jake Wallman. That would be pretty
Yeah,
cool.
right. A Jake Wallman would be fantastic for them, or even a guy like a Shane Gostisbehere. But a guy who I like, and we'll get to that comment in a second with Mike Greer and the Sharks, but a guy who I think the Red Wings should go out and get, and Tim, you're very familiar with this guy. It's a Matt Grzelcyk. I think he's an underrated defenseman. He obviously puts up points. He got 39 assists last year, only got one goal, but it was a low year for him. Well, don't you think he looked good
Uh,
wearing the Red Wings red and white, Tim?
He's okay. He's about as boring as safe as it gets among NHL defensemen,
Yeah.
which is valuable, but I feel like I'd rather have him go be a fifth, fourth defenseman on a playoff team or like a locked-in playoff team, a cup contending team. I think Detroit would love to get a home run. And one of the names I've seen them linked to, and this has to do with the Gavrikov deal, if indeed he does go to New York, is Keandre Miller. He's going to be probably be looking for a new home, and I feel like they can go get him. He's physical, he's fast. He's obviously got a lot of holes in his game, but I feel like if he could develop and get some fresh scenery, he could end up being a real impact player for them or wherever he
All right.
goes.
I agree. I agree. I hate to agree with you, but I agree. All right. The question on screen was, what should Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks do? And my answer is not too much.
Yeah.
You have done great rebuilding this roster. You just bought out Mark-Edward Vlasic on the back end. You got Celebrini, you got Will Smith, you got Misa in the draft at number 2. Those are 3 high-end forwards. William Eklund is a great forward. You bring in some vets to shore up this front with Tyler Toffoli and a Barclay Goodrow to kind of mentor these young guys. The last thing I want to do is ruin that mojo that they have going up front. They were a fun team to watch last year, even though they struggled. I think they came second worst in the league. The vibe was good. Like it was a good environment. I went there for the Jumbo jersey retirement. I got to spend some time with some of the guys. It was polar opposite, you know, what other rebuilding teams are going through. Like the Chicago Blackhawks, very similar trajectory. Chicago, it was negative. They're firing your coach. Connor Bedard was upset. You could tell he just wasn't having a good time. Then you look at San Jose, everybody's upbeat because they see where this franchise is going. But in my eyes, and call me crazy, the back end, obviously you lose Vlasic. You got Ferraro. You have some okay pieces back there and Liljegren and stuff. I would bring in a vet to shore up that back end. And just to be a mentor to these guys. And what better guy to bring in is a Brent Burns?
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, he played the majority of his career there when he got traded there for the Minnesota Wild for Charlie Coyle, and he played great. He's obviously spent the last few years with the Carolina Hurricanes. He's a UFA. He's 40 years old. I know he loves San Jose. I know his family loves San Jose. His 3 kids, his wife, they would love going back to the Bay. His good friends live there still. So that makes sense for me. If I'm Mike Greer, I'm not giving him a huge deal. I'm not going, 5, 6 years for him, but I'm doing 2 years with Brent Burns, probably at 2, 3 million. I know what he brings to the team. I know he's not cancer who's going to need a ton of minutes, but he still has the ability, Tim, to go out and play 25 minutes. We saw him last year in Carolina. Like he's still a very good defenseman who you can slot inside a good young defenseman or a solid, middle of the tier guy like a Mario Ferraro, and it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense to me. All right, this might be for you, Tim. You're a North Carolina guy. Who do the Hurricanes go after now? They wrap up Logan Stankoven. They have a ton of money to spend. They want to get back in the mix. They have a good core of players up front and on the back end. What do the Hurricanes do?
I think the Hurricanes are going to be very active this summer and starting today. And I think you're going to see them linked to a lot of the big names on the market, right? Like Drouin, like Ehlers, like Granlund. I think you can see them linked to all of those guys. But the report, just as a couple of minutes ago, Elliot Friedman said, don't expect Nikolai Ehlers to sign today. They're going to play the
Ooh.
market. They're going to play this out, which is going to impact everything else. Because, like I said, usually you see a domino effect where the big deals go first and then teams go to their second and third options. But if Ehlers is committed to giving this some time and not signing today, you might see other teams rush to get a Granlund or a Drouin because you don't want to miss out on getting a key piece, especially in a thinner market. But to answer the question, yeah, I think Carolina is going to be active. I would love to see them grab a Boeser or an Ehlers or a Granlund or someone like that.
I agree. I think a Granlund would be great in Carolina. I think that would be the perfect fit for both player and team. He would get an opportunity to play on a first line where I don't think he's really played his whole career consistently. So that would be great. All right, moving on. It's not often, Tim, you get a coaching getting gassed after having a successful season. But that's exactly what happened in Dallas, where their head coach Pete DeBoer was fired, rightfully so. He pulls Jake Ottinger early in Game 6 in an elimination game, and he goes to their backup Casey DeSmith, who's just terrified to go in the game. But he brings in Jake Ottinger. Obviously, they lose that game, and he gets fired. While they have found a new coach, it is Glenn Gulutzan. He was a head coach in the NHL before. He's been the assistant coach for the aforementioned Edmonton Oilers for the last 7 years. He comes to the Dallas Stars again, where he was from 2011 to 2013. Tim, does this even move the needle for the Dallas Stars? Is this going to be a difference maker for this team? Do coaches really matter these days? Because you see in Florida, before you give your answer, Florida, President's Trophy winning, best team in the world offensively. They get rid of their coach. You bring in a Paul Maurice, which was a critical move. People saying he hasn't won anything. All of a sudden, 3 straight Stanley Cups, 2 Stanley Cup championships. Can we see the same thing in Dallas with their new coach, Glenn Gulutzan?
Yeah, it's a nice hiring. Of course, coaches matter, but they matter differently in different situations. And a lot of times you see teams that have talent, that don't have an identity, that don't have a system, that don't have a locked-in lineup. And then all of a sudden, the coach can give them all that and inspire their players. You saw that what Maurice did in Florida. I think Brendan Moore did that with the Hurricanes. I think DeBoer honestly did that with Dallas, but he outstayed his welcome. And a lot of times when you get to that point, the coaches, the best thing they can do is stay out of the way. It's just like a goalie. Like, we don't need you to win the game every night, but we need you not to lose the game. And sometimes coaches just they make the wrong decision, and your career can hang on one decision. I think we saw that with DeBoer, who I think is going to get another job, whether it's this summer or next year. Like, he's obviously going to coach in the NHL again, but what he did with pulling Ottinger was the wrong move, obviously. So he's out. Gulutzan's in. I don't expect a ton of changes from him. You have this roster locked in. You have their contracts locked up. They're a good team. They're going to be a good team either way. I think just get the best out of your players and don't change too much.
Yeah, it's a ballsy move to pull a Jake Ottinger, who is one of a handful of goalies in the NHL who arguably is the best goaltender in the league, but he was struggling. But then
Yeah.
you look across the ice at Chris Knobloch, did the same thing with Stuart Skinner. And you put in a Calvin Bouchard and he rips off 7 straight wins. So it's a gutsy move. If he's playing the LA Kings and Picard comes in and he lays an egg and then you go down 3-0 instead of winning that game and being down 2-1, it could be a similar situation in Edmonton. So you don't know the results. And if you're a coach, you're sitting there going, I don't know. Like, I go with my gut, and Ottinger wasn't playing good, and I don't want to leave him in the game until the second period, and we're down 4-5 reps. So I got to go with what I think is right for the team. So do I like this hiring? Do I like the firing of Pete DeBoer? Not really. I think Pete DeBoer is a really good coach. He has won wherever he's gone. And getting a new face, a new voice, maybe that helps. But I think Dallas they already have a good team. They're going to compete. They have stars. I don't think the coach really, pun intended, I don't think the coach really moves the needle too much per se. But yeah, good for them. A new voice. I think Jake Ottinger's happy because he knows if he's upset and you pull him, the coach will be fired. So now he knows his net is his net, and the coach has no impact on that whatsoever. The precedent has been set. Tim, what's up?
We have another signing that came in. Christian Dvorak has signed a 1-year deal with the Philadelphia Flyers for
Oh my gosh.
$5.4 million. So the Flyers are active. Yeah, I think he's, again, a nice player. He's a complimentary player. He's a guy who's got some skill, but hasn't been able to quite put it all together. His career high in points was like 7 years ago, and that was 38 points. He had 33 last year. It's a nice move, but hopefully the Flyers aren't done.
Listen, $5.4 million for Christian Dvorak? What are we doing? That's a lot of money to spend for this guy, especially considering what he did in Montreal last year. What? Like, not great, Tim. That's a lot of money. I know we're not grading trades here and everything or signings. If that's your priority and you're Danny Briere and your first 2 calls are Noah Juleson and Christian Dvorak, and you have to go back to your team and go, oh, how'd we do? I got Dvorak and Juleson. This is a terrible signing. I get 1 year, and much like the trade for, gosh, who did Bruins get? Arvidsson, you could kind of parlay this into a trade at the deadline because the Flyers won't be contenders this year. But holy hell, $5.4 million at 1 year. It's such a weird deal and such a large amount for a player. So He's not good, Danny. Not good. I think this is second jump in free agency, and so far, not no bueno for that signing in my eyes.
Yeah, I get it, but again, like it's a 1 year deal. You know you're not going to compete this year. You need to fill your roster with some NHL talent. To use a baseball analogy, you need a guy that's going to come in and throw some innings just to eat them up. And I feel like this is that. So it,
Oh,
it's overpaid, I guess, but again, low risk. You have the money. Why not just get a middle sixth forward to help, bridge the gap?
maybe this is a new world with a salary cap, but holy hell, does that mean that pushes Trevor Zegras to the wing? Because right now their centermen are Noah Cates, you got Couturier, you got Zegras who plays wing and center. I would suppose Christian Dvorak is third line, but I have no idea where they slot him in when he's making $5.4 million. But that's a lot of money, especially for like the amount that he's gonna get. Like he's gonna get 20 points. It's absolutely bonkers that he signed with that. But anyways, it's a new world, Tim. What do I know? I wish I was playing now. That's all I know because this is an insane world that he gets $5.4 million.
So now you talked about how every year you were kind of anxious and trying to distract yourself because you were a lower priority. And now, aren't you glad that you're not a free agent right now, where you're already down the bottom of the list, and then you have to worry about the delays because of the tampering allegations, where you might not have signed for a couple of days now. It must be nice to sit back and relax and just be a suspect or a watcher this time.
Yeah, it's nice to see, but I can also put myself in these guys' shoes and go, holy hell, like it's got to be nerve-wracking. But yeah, it's a bizarre time. I think hockey is the only sport that has this one day free for all. Baseball doesn't really have it. Football kind of has it. Basketball, not really. Their superstars are being traded every other day. So hockey is a special sport where you remake your team right now. Like you remake your whole franchise potentially right now, and the lead up to this is crazy what happening. GMs can just transition their team from a nothing burger to a competitive Stanley Cup team in the blink of an eye. And when you look last year, what happened on July 1, a team like the Nashville Predators, they go out and win free agency. You bring in a Steven Stamkos, you bring in a Jonathan Marchessault, you get Brady Shea, the three top guys out there, and you think, oh, that's it, locked and loaded for the next 5 years. We're going to be Stanley Cup contenders. But the beautiful thing about hockey is you got to play the game. They don't hand you the wins before the season, and then you look back now, it's like, oh, that was a terrible job of the Nashville Predators, and they're trying to unload these guys, Tim.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were talking about that before the show. The Nashville Predators last year on this very stream, we were ready to crown them the winners of the offseason, the winners of July 1st, and Stanley Cup contenders. They had signed Stamkos, they signed Marchessault, they signed Brady Shea, like three of the top five free agents available. They were already a pretty good team. They had, prime Forsberg, prime Yossi, prime who's the goalie? I'm blanking on the name. But
Saros.
Saros, like, yeah, they were good. And then all of a sudden, basically from game one, day one, they had nothing going. And it just kind of goes to show that, yeah, we need to, think about the trades and the signings that are happening right now, but you can't evaluate it all on July 1st because it takes time to show. And a lot of these that look good today are going to end up missing.
Yeah, I agree. And looking back on signings, I think that's why teams are a little more hesitant because this is a cautionary tale with the Nashville Predators because now they are stuck with these guys and they are just declining at a rapid rate. And Marchessault and Stamkos both looked out of sorts last season and don't look now, they're not getting any younger. So this is a team that went all in. They went for these guys and now they're going to stink for the next few years. And they bring in Nicholas Hague from the Vegas Golden Knights, and you sign him to a $5.5 million deal for, was it 4 or 5 years? Which to me is just mind boggling that you give that guy that much money. And then subsequently the next day, Ekblad gets a deal for $6 million. And you go, hold on. Yeah, well, I know it's a team friendly deal, but it's just funny to look at the numbers where Hague's at 5.5 and Ekblad's at 6.1. So it's just in the talent level and disparity between those two players is more than $600,000. So it's just really funny. Speaking of defensemen getting big ticket, big numbers, Evan Bouchard signed with the Edmonton Oilers yesterday. Why do you roll your eyes? This is
No,
a huge
I'm
deal.
reacting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
huge deal for the Edmonton Oilers. He was obviously the guy in Edmonton. He played great, maybe not so much in the playoffs and down the stretch, but he is a fantastic defenseman. I like this guy. And he re-upped for 4 years at $10.5 million. That puts him to 29 years old where he's going to be UFA and he's going to just cash in on a 12, 13, $14 million contract. But Edmonton gets the deal done. He is now an Oiler for the next 4 years. What were your thoughts on this deal, Tim? 10.5 for 4 years from Evan Bouchard, who arguably has been one of the top defenders points wise for the last 3 years in the NHL.
I mean, yeah, he's an imperfect player, obviously, but I think this is actually a pretty team-friendly deal. I think he's a guy that could be earning a lot more and could demand a lot more. He obviously buys into what they're doing, and he wants to increase their chances of winning. To be so close 2 years in a row, and not have it. I know he's only 25 years old. By the way, it feels like he's been around forever. I thought he was like 28, 29 already. It's a team-friendly deal. The problem is, yeah, you need to pair him with someone who's responsible, who's not going to make mistakes, that can make up for his mistakes. And usually that's Ekholm, and it was this year, but Ekholm clearly wasn't at 100%, and that kind of exposed Bouchard a little bit. Nurse isn't that guy. Ekholm's older. He's 35. He has one more year on his contract. Assuming he can get through this year, you got to think one of the priorities for the Oilers is getting a reliable defensive defenseman, a responsible coach's guy that you can pair with Bouchard and not worry about his lack in defensive game.
Yeah, and they are a destination for players. It's not every day you get to play with the high-end talent that they have, and it's a team where you can go and resurrect your career. Because you can go and slot inside an Evan Bouchard or slot beside a Darnell Nurse or a Jake Wallman and get some good minutes and some good points. I don't think Ty Emberson is a long-term option for them. Obviously, Brett Kulak, I really, really like. But if I'm a vet and I want to go and milk a couple more years out of my career, much like Corey Perry has done on the front end, why not go to Edmonton? It's a low risk, very, very high ceiling risk to take. And you can take a team friendly deal initially and then cash in on the back end. But there's some guys out there, a guy who just won the Stanley Cup, Nate Schmidt. You're still fairly young in your career, 33 years old, but I know he's going to want to cash in and get some more money. But those types of players who maybe want to win, who want to go to a position where they can extend their career. You see the forwards do it all the time. Jeff Skinner, the Arvidssons, the Corey Perrys, the Enriques. These guys go to Edmonton thinking, oh, I can play with McDavid for a couple years, maybe win a cup, and then sign a long-term deal somewhere else, 4 or 5 years, to prolong my career. But I don't know. Do you see any unrestricted free agent defensemen who maybe have some miles on them that would maybe want to go to Edmonton? Because we saw they were a little bit exposed in the playoffs, like a Calvin DeHaan, or like even a guy like a Chad Ruhwedel, who I played with in Buffalo, who's a good defenseman, but maybe not as sexy or well known as the other guys on the market.
I mean, you mentioned already like Matt Grzelcyk and Brent Burns, and they're kind of boring players, but sometimes I feel like Edmonton needs more boring players, right? They have so much talent. They need guys that can just play simple hockey. And so maybe those names make sense. Maybe Gavrikov is a name they'd love to go. They probably can't afford him though. So Orlov, another name, but Orlov got exposed a lot in the playoffs. You could attribute like 4 or 5 goals against in that series just to Orlov's mistakes, and a lot of that had to do with Burns too. I don't know if it's probably more of a trade thing.
Yeah, I agree. A team that I think might be players for defensemen, and I don't know anything. We'll talk to Frank when he gets in here, but Alex Pietrangelo just retired from the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, they bring in Mitch Marner, but when you look at this team and you look at the back end, it gets pretty thin. Brady McNabb just re-upped there last year, I believe, but he's not getting any younger. You have Shea Theodore, who they didn't want to give up because obviously they knew Pietrangelo wasn't going to come back, and then Noah Hannafin. But after that, there's not much left in the cupboard. You got Zach Whitecloud, Jeremy Lazan. It wouldn't surprise me if they go out and grab somebody because they need some help on the back end. They're slow, they're kind of plodding. They would like to get a fleet-footed young guy to come in. Maybe they have that in the system that I don't know about. But the Vegas Golden Knights, when you're a Stanley Cup contender, we saw they don't sit on their hands. They're going out and making moves. They're trying to make their team better. Does it make sense for you, Tim, for them to flip one of their forwards? Because now when you look at up front, they got Marner, they got Eichel, you got Stone, you got Hurdle, you got Carlson, Barbashev. Like that's murderer's row of forwards. Like that's an incredible top six. Would you flip one of them to get a good solid defenseman to shore up that top four on the back end?
Maybe, but you've still got some pretty good defensemen, even with Petrangelo down, with Shea Theodore, Noah Hannafin, like those. I don't think defense is the problem there. So let's go to Frank Seravalli and see what he's hearing.
All right, Frank, what do we got? I think we got a big one coming out of Vancouver.
Yeah, look, I haven't heard anything on Brock Boeser and Vancouver. I see the reporting. Not saying it's wrong. I just know that there were some seriously burnt bridges there over the last number of weeks and months. And that if they had a giant get back together kumbaya, this would be pretty groundbreaking because these two sides were not seeing eye to eye. Brock Boeser was an incredibly loyal Vancouver Canuck, wanted nothing more than to be there, and really felt like that relationship was damaged, not only with the offers that they had made, but the way that they had handled the trade deadline. Now, what I had mentioned for a little bit, and seeing some Dan Murphy here with the tweets, 725 times 7, the term makes a ton of sense. Their initial offer to Brock Boeser was 5 years times $8 million. So obviously gets quite a bit more money. And in this case, stays in a very familiar place. But I'm telling you, this relationship needed some repairing. And maybe it took an offer like this to get it done. They had went back to him as recently as the middle of last week, and I was told that it was a non-starter and Brock Boeser was going to market. So a massive change of heart, and Boeser ends up not leaving, which is very interesting.
Yeah, especially for those Canucks. They are continuing to just have an interesting offseason. They're going for it, so you got to be good for them. But yeah, it's weird as a player. Tim, 5 years, $8 million, and I think he's 29 years old. That gives him another opportunity to be a free agent with the cap going up. I would have taken that deal over a 7 year, 7.25, especially for a guy who's been in Vancouver his whole career. He obviously likes it there, but it gives you that opportunity to kind of play the market when you're still kind of in your prime. But right now, this locks him up until he's 36 years old. And I don't know, but yeah, good move by the Vancouver Canucks. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. And I just keep thinking about how with these moves coming in, that Nick Ehlers' value, his number just probably keeps going up and up. We saw a report a few minutes ago that Nikolai Ehlers wasn't going to sign today. Are you hearing that too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so not surprised on Nikolai Ehlers. My understanding was that they were still kind of trying to sort out and figure out exactly what the market looked like. I can tell you a couple things on Nikolai Ehlers. One is that he wants to be somewhere warm, so probably not going back to Winnipeg, even though the Jets made some significant pleas to keep him. And two, he's played in a white-hot market for so long that's so intense that I think part of his process in terms of also getting to somewhere warm is maybe a market that doesn't have as much intensity to it. So those are some of the things that were on his wish list. The team that everyone kept talking about was the Carolina Hurricanes. I would add in the Washington Capitals. I know the Caps had something big up their sleeves. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but certainly Nikolai Ehlers would count as that. And outside of that, I'm not entirely sure what exactly the Caps would be swinging big on if it's not Ehlers, given what this market looks like. So those are the two teams that I've been keyed in on the Nick Ehlers front. I mean, we may not get a decision today, but sometimes these things end up moving a little bit more quickly. And as mentioned, I think there's a lot of concerns about tampering. I think there's a bunch of deals that I suspect to happen that have not gotten quite over the finish line yet, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes sense. They're sitting on a desk somewhere waiting to be submitted to the NHL. I firmly believe that's the case for a lot of these deals. But a player that has re-signed with his team, a team that we just talked about, the San Jose Sharks, William Eklund, the good young star forward, not star quite yet, 22-year-old forward from Sweden. He has re-signed for a 3-year, $5.6 million deal. Mike Grier gets that deal done for this kid. Bridge deal. He will still be a restricted free agent when the deal ends in 2029, meaning they have control over him indefinitely. What do you think, Tim? William Eklund really came on the scene last year for the San Jose Sharks. He put up 45 points in 80 games when given the opportunity. This year only got better. 58 points in 77 games. Slotted in nicely with Celebrini on that top line. Potentially Will Smith on the right side. That's a good, young first line to build with and to grow with for this franchise. You must love this deal for both team and player, don't you think?
I do. It wasn't that long ago that Eklund was like the piece that we were excited to build around. Like he was like the young guy in the Shark system. And in the last 18 months, you've seen Michael Misa, you've seen Celebrini, you've seen Will Smith, and all of a sudden Eklund's like the third or fourth guy in their team, which is just a credit to Mike Grier and what he's built in the roster and where they're heading in this direction.
Yeah, I love this. And it's not an outrageous number. Like $5.6 million for that guy is not a crazy number. And especially, I forgot to mention on the back end, Sam Dickinson. He's
Yeah.
going to be an incredible defenseman on the back end for this guy. Another good reason to bring in Brent Burns would be to mentor that guy or a big, just solid veteran defenseman to help that back end. But back to Eklund. We had Zetterlund on that show, I think it was 5 months ago, before he got dealt to the Ottawa Senators. And we were talking to him, who do you like on this team? He's like, I spend all my time with William Eklund. He's like, he's my best buddy. We do everything together. He is an incredible hockey player, an incredible human. And for Mike Greer to have the wherewithal to re-sign this guy to a 3-year deal, because you're still feeling him out if you're Mike Greer. Is he a first-line guy? Is he going to be a guy I can build my franchise around? Because I know I have two studs up front that I can. Celebrini and Will Smith. I know I have guys in the back end who I can build this team around. I went out and got Askarov to shore up the goaltending situation. Michael Misa is going to be an incredible forward for this team. It gives him a couple more years just to look at him, to make sure he's that guy before he invests $10-12 million with them 8 years, because that's what he will get, Tim, in 3 years. So great by Mike Greer. He has done an incredible job with this roster. Just getting a roster that has big contracts, maybe not the greatest contracts, being able to unload them and get draft capital in return and then turn it around so quickly. He's done a great job with this team.
There's another signing that just came in. I'd love to hear what Frank has to say about this. But the report from Bob McKenzie, this sounds like the Kings are finalizing a deal with Corey Perry, probably a 1-year deal around the $1 million. Frank, have you heard anything on this yet?
Yeah, that base salary tracks exactly with what we were just talking about with Corey Perry, and the LA Kings were one of the first teams out of my mouth when we were talking about those options. And I thought that it would come down to, if he actually did make it out of Edmonton and the market, one of LA or Toronto. I think the Maple Leafs would have been one of those teams right there to try and add exactly what Corey Perry brings. But reuniting with Ken Holland, who he had, of course, that brought him to Edmonton, is probably a comfort factor. And a Kings team that has struggled to get over the hump, of course, the last 4 years in the first round. So they're looking for a little bit something different. I'm working on the bonus structure, but what I can tell you is that the LA Kings are not done. I'd expect the Kings to be in the market for Cody Ceci on the back end. And I'd also expect the Kings to be shopping for someone like a Yoel Armia up front. So keep an eye on those two names. Certainly not done, but those are some of the names that I'm hearing connected to the Kings.
Nice. And everyone's going to make the joke, well, now they go to the Stanley Cup Finals and lose, blah, blah, blah. But it's a good move by the Kings. Like, they have a good young crop of forwards who need a good vet. I know they have Anze Kopitar. I know you got some other pieces, but I like this move. It's a low-risk guy. And would you be surprised, Frank? I know you're working the phone and this and that. Is there a no-move clause? I know you don't have the contract in front of you, but just say they aren't in the running. Is he a guy that gets flipped at the deadline?
I mean, Corey Perry's not going anywhere that Corey Perry doesn't want to go. That's right, the truth. Yeah. Like, he's earned, if it's not a formal no move, no trade, no GM is going to ship him somewhere without his sort of tacit approval. So I'd expect that he's certainly going to have that as part of his deal. And I would expect the Kings to be a pretty firm playoff team anyway. So I think this Kings team is going to add some, I mentioned the changes that they're trying to make on their back end, trying to add a veteran right shot defenseman to replace Jordan Spence and a veteran left shot as well. Actually, here we go. Got something right now. Sources say Yoel Armia is going to the LA Kings. Done deal.
Nailed that, Frank. Nicely done. Live time. Frank Seravalli just nailing it in the July 1st draft. But yeah, the LA Kings, it's an interesting conundrum where if I'm Corey Perry, why pick the LA Kings? You know, there are maybe better options. You just waxed them in the first round of the playoffs with your Edmonton Oilers. If the offer wasn't there by the Edmonton Oilers, based on what Frank was saying, there's a laundry list of teams. I don't know. It seems like a strange deal. LA is a great place to play. It's obviously a great city. There's lots to do. They have some good players that have potential, but I don't know. I maybe would have gone elsewhere, but everybody knows Corey Perry. He's a winner, Tim. He will win wherever he goes. So it's a good signing by the LA Kings. And look at this, Frank. Bold. Sources say Joel Armia will be joining the Kings. What when you tweet, is it just like your fingers are wild? Do you have all these hashtags already queued up, or what is it like?
No, I know the hashtags sadly by memory because I'm a dork. And you just you just go. Certain teams have certain different hashtags. Like
It's wild.
the Anaheim Ducks are the NHL Ducks because there's like the Oregon Ducks and all sorts of other Ducks that are involved in sports. The Carolina Hurricanes, got to find something else for them because there's the Miami Hurricanes. There's all sorts of different ones. Boston Bruins, UCLA Bruins. You got to know which one you're tweeting when you're using the hashtag.
So we got about 20 minutes left with us, and I don't know what you're doing after this, but we've been 40 minutes in, and we've had about what? A couple re-signings and a couple of minor pieces, tertiary pieces. Is this what you expected for the beginning of free agency? I know tampering and all that junk, but when are we going to see some big names dropping? When are we going to see a Gavrikov? When are we going to see one of these guys in some actual like 6-7 years drop, Frank?
How greedy are you going to be? We told you before the show started that there was going to be the big four. Brock Boeser was part of that group. He's gone in the first 40 minutes. 7-year
Resigns.
deal. But look, here's the truth. Brock Boeser had 8 to 10 teams lined up. I heard one of the teams, oddly enough, interested to get a chance at Brock Boeser was the Pittsburgh Penguins. It was all over the map, the things that Brock Boeser had on his plate. The only one that I could rule out for Brock Boeser was the Winnipeg Jets. It's the only place I knew he wasn't going. Other than that, the world was his oyster. And I mentioned this already, so loyal, really wanted to be part of the Canucks and was disappointed with how it played out. He was one of those guys that as the chaos was exploding around him, all these last number of years, whether it's the umpteen coaching changes, couple different regime changes that he lived through, and then even this JT Miller and Elias Pettersson debacle that, crashed their whole season last year. That guy, he just had blinders on. All he ever wanted to be was a Canuck. And so when he got to the deadline and the Canucks sort of made the joke, like, you wouldn't believe how poor the offers were for this guy, that hurt. He really took that to heart. So the fact that he has re-signed in Van, I'm telling you, I cannot explain to you what a massive change of heart that is, because anyone that was talking about Brock Boeser and the Canucks a week ago, people were laughing behind the scenes saying that there's no way that marriage gets put back together again.
Well, yeah, you bring back Demko, you bring back Boeser, you bring in Evander Kane. I guess they're going to be Stanley Cup contender. I don't know, because that's what I always go back to. Are they a Stanley Cup contender? But I love Boeser. I love everything they're doing. But yeah, we'll see how that pans out. All right, Frank, we're going to lose you here in a couple minutes. Any last words for us before you take off?
Seeing one more report, and I believe it to be accurate. Dan Vladar going to the Philadelphia Flyers on a 2-year deal. We went back to our goalie board before the show, as the show was starting, and kind of tried to lay out what the goaltending map looked like. The Flyers were one of the very few teams that were looking for a starter. And so the Flyers announcing this deal, this is going to be the guy that plays with Sam Ersson. Ivan Fedotov is going to go to the AHL, where they're hoping the big guy can rehab his game. But this is a massive opportunity for Vladar, who, by the way, is not an old goalie by any stretch of the imagination and was looking for more of a chance. So leaves Calgary, where he's playing behind Dustin Wolf, and actually really helped Wolf get his feet wet last year, taking on a lot of the big important starts. And as mentioned, I don't think Calgary's done on the goalie front. I signaled Ivan Prosvetov was a guy that they'd be looking at today. If they don't land him, they're okay bringing up Devin Cooley from the AHL. But Dan Vladar going to Philly, they get a guy that they can hopefully maybe find some stability in net, because you think back to the last 3 seasons, and now they've got a coaching change, but the last 3 seasons under John Tortorella, like 28th, 30th, 31st in the league in goaltending, not very good. So this signing with Dan Vladar gives them an opportunity to maybe bounce back.
Yeah, I'm still hopeful on Fedotov, but yeah, he has not panned out since he came over from Russia. Mountain of man, 6'7" Tim, exactly what GMs want in a goaltender these days. But yeah, Dan Vladar,
Frank, let me ask you a question, Frank. One name we haven't heard anything about yet is Brent Burns. Have you heard his name linked to anybody yet? Do you know where he wants to be?
So I have not heard him linked to anyone outside of Carolina. I think the Canes were considering bringing him back on a short-term, short money deal. Rod Brindamore really liked having him around. I think kind of a quintessential Rod Brindamore player. I think they were also looking at what kind of upgrades they might be able to make on defense before fully committing or solidifying that. And Burns, even at his age, one of the true masters of the game, which you can mock the Carolina Hurricanes if you want. Rod Brindamore railed against this idea of shot volume in the postseason, but there are so few players in the history of the sport that get pucks through from the blue line as well as Brent Burns does, always involved in the rush. And quite obviously, John, a guy that takes real good care of himself.
Oh, hell yeah. I played with him in Minnesota and in San Jose. And the one thing I always come away with is how he takes care of his body, because he takes a beating. He's a big body, 6'4", and he's not light. He's like 230 pounds. So for him to lug that weight around and still be playing 20, 25 minutes a game at his age, you have to take care of your body. So I'm surprised Carolina didn't re-up him. I know they have a logjam on the back end, but he's such a valuable piece. And like you said, I feel like he would have taken a hometown discount. And it's strange that the whole Corey Perry thing, and maybe, reports weren't true that he wanted to stay in Edmonton, because $1 million these days doesn't seem like a lot of money when you're paying stinking Christian Dvorak 5.4.
Well, it is going to be a bonus laden deal, as I mentioned. So I think the total that he could earn is like something like, he was asking Edmonton to get to 2.5. Now that he goes to the open market, something like 3.5, 4.5. That's more the range for a Kings team that doesn't have really any cap concerns. And no one really has the cap concerns in general with Perry, because you can punt it to the following year if you do hit the cap, which means that essentially the only decision that you'd be making today is, if Corey Perry maxes out his bonuses, are we comfortable sliding him what would be next year's cap increase? And I think a lot of teams would say, if you're hitting all your bonuses, that means our team's doing incredibly well. We'd be happy to chew up some of next year's cap space today.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if Stan Bowman takes any heat for that, because he was pretty outright that he wanted to stay at Edmonton. We got a YouTube comment. I don't know what it was, Tim, but do you have it?
Let's throw it up on the screen here for Frank.
I think it was something of, are you surprised with the lack of action going on in this year's free agent? It says, what does it feel like this free agency won't be as exciting in years past? Tampering.
Well, the class, for one. I mean, think about all the names, not just in the last 24 hours that were off the board in Marchand and Ekblad, but go back a week and you had Sam Bennett. Now let's rewind back to like the beginning of the season and late last summer, all the extensions that were signed. Shesterkin and go through the list. It was at one point in time a very sexy free agent crop, which is why I was kind of laughing at some of the reporting that we saw from a few weeks ago that were like, hey, should teams keep their powder dry in 2025? Because look ahead to next year's free agent class. It's massive. You could have Alex Ovechkin and all these other players that hit the open market. And it's like, yeah, but that's the thing. Hockey players don't often make it to market. And the guys that do make it to market, one of the big things that these GMs are finally learning is there's a reason for that. If they're too expensive, it's because their team didn't feel that they were worth that value, because hockey teams, and particularly GMs, they're so risk averse. The biggest thing that keeps them up at night is, oh my God, how are we going to hang on to all of our players? Instead of looking at the salary cap space as opportunity. So when you think about future free agent classes, whatever it looks like, cut off 75% of that crop, because those guys are potentially all going to be re-signing. And I'd say the same about this one. So that makes it less entertaining. Plus the fact that you get to this moment in time with the tampering scare and teams are waiting till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in order to get deals done.
Well, ask and you shall receive. And I think someone heard my wishes, because Gavrikov has just signed with the New York Rangers, 7 years, $7 million, almost $50 million for him. That's exactly what I said to him. I said he should go for 7 years, $7 million. Everybody thought he was going to get 8.5, but he definitely maybe takes a pay cut more than less than he would have gotten from other teams. Maybe he just really wanted to go to the New York Rangers. I don't know. Will the tampering charges now be submitted by the LA Kings to the NHL? We'll find out there. But 7 years, $7 million for a guy who will shore up that back end. What do you guys think on this signing, Frank? You had a little smirk on your face.
No, I was just laughing about your idea of the tampering charge. Like, if you're going to go after Gavrikov and the Rangers, then you're going to go after Marner and you're going to go after everyone. And the truth is, I said at the beginning of the show, if everyone is cheating, then no one is cheating. That's the truth. In Gavrikov, this is a very important signing for the New York Rangers, and it's not just because it's a massive deal. It's because think about what has ailed New York for the last number of years. One of the best goalies in the world, certainly one of the best of his generation, and yet they have not properly supported him because they have not found a way to defend better. And that was the mission and mandate for Chris Drury heading into this offseason, was reinvent this defense core to find a way to do that better and be cleaner in your own end. I don't care how many times they change coaches, whether it's Gerard Gallant or Peter Laviolette or now on to Mike Sullivan. It was a personnel issue. And so they've moved on from Lindgren and they've moved on from Trouba, and they're going to continue to make changes to this team. Probably Keandre Miller is a guy that could be on the move here in very short order, potentially even today, that they had decisions to make to say, how do we better surround our group? And Gavrikov, they identified early on, again, in a very thin class, as one of those upper echelon defenders. And I say that as a defender, not a defenseman, that I think will help support exactly what the Rangers are looking for.
Yeah, he'll slot in nicely on the left-hand side. Do you, going back to Keandre, because he was once just a highly prospect. Everybody thought so highly of him. He had his moments where he played so great, but he's also had his moments where he's just made terrible decision-making, bad plays, not good. If I'm Chris Drury, does this make him even more open for a trade, a luxury to get rid of him and then try to fill that spot with a young kid coming up, give him an opportunity? Because I think he's overstayed his welcome with the Rangers.
He is, I don't think overstayed his welcome, but I think what the Rangers have arrived at is no different than a crossroads that the Islanders did with Noah Dobson, or that the Minnesota Wild are at with Marco Rossi. You hit restricted free agency and you're owed a new contract. And particularly when every dollar is accounted for in New York that does spend to the cap every year, you have to make the decision, is this guy a ride or die guy for us or not? Are we going to be with him for the long haul? Is this someone that we really want? And at the same exact moment in time that that's happening for New York, think about what we just talked about and how thin the crop is for players that could potentially be on the move. What does everyone else see? They see a massive defenseman who skates so effortlessly and efficiently that they think that whatever inefficiencies Miller had, that they could coach them out of him, because he's still young enough to think that he hasn't arrived at this moment in time where he's set for good, where you can change and can get better. So there's potential and upside there that teams see as untapped. The Rangers, having had their hands on him for a while, they know he's a good player, but are we going to be committing massive term and dollars to Keandre Miller? That's the part that they're less sure about. And when you've got a great trade value on the other end of it, it probably just makes sense to cut bait and move on.
Yeah, I guess I always forget about he is 25 years old. Just so that the ceiling is still really high on him if you work with him. I was with Bernsey when he was in Minnesota and they put him at forward. They try to figure it out. Then he goes to San Jose and he becomes a Norris caliber defenseman for 10 years. So there is a lot of upside. There was a comment there we saw. Does it make sense now for the LA Kings to trade Philip Deneau to the Montreal Canadiens for Mike Matheson? Do you think is there a world where they get rid of Philip Deneau on the LA Kings?
I would be surprised. He has a full no trade as well. What I would say is I do think the Canadiens are getting to a place where Mike Matheson is also going to be pretty expensive, and they're going to have to make a decision on that front as their blue line gets a little bit more crowded. But what I can tell you is that the Canadiens are pretty excited about the idea of being able to go lefty-righty between Dobson and Hudson. Not on the same pair, but to put those guys with Matheson and probably Caden Goalie, and you've got a really stout top four on your back end to go with two lines up front that are as good, I think, in young talent and firepower as any in the league. That, okay, Montreal's got their first two lines and first two D pairs figured out. Now you got to figure out the rest.
You're a Philly guy, right, Frank?
Yep, born and raised.
How do you think Danny's doing so far? Christian Dvorak, 5.4, Noel Juleson. Are they a better team this year than they were last year so far?
They're definitely more well-supported. Vladar is going to go a long way. His numbers haven't been sparkling in Calgary, but I think the size that he has and coupled with, giving Urson a chance to breathe is probably going to be pretty big. I just think the Flyers have a long way to go. They're going to be more competitive. I don't see them as a playoff team this year. And in fact, I would argue that this isn't the year that you wanted to add more pieces to support this team, given that there's a really special draft class on the other end to try and potentially get a difference maker. The last thing you want to do is be finishing, picking 6th, 7th, 8th when you could have been picking in the lottery zone for those types of players. It's not just Gavin McKenna. Keep your eye on a guy like Keaton Verhoff, who's going to North Dakota next year, played at Victoria. Absolute stud, 6'4" defenseman that's going to be $100 million player in the NHL. Book it, guaranteed. You can only get your hands on those guys every so often. And so the thing that I've kept coming back to for the Flyers as part of this build, and not to harp on it, has been you've got to check positional boxes. And it's great that you went out and got the best player available in the draft in Porter Martone, but you don't have a franchise goalie for the long haul. You don't have a franchise defenseman, and you don't have a franchise center. And when those three boxes remain unchecked, you're still pretty far away. Good pieces. Martone's going to be great. And some of the other guys, Bump and Bonk and all those other guys that are in the mix are all exciting, and Michkov, but not all of them check those positional boxes, and that's what the Flyers need to continue to chip away at. Christian Dvorak on a 1-year deal is not going to get the job done. He's just a placeholder.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he's doing a terrible job. One thing before we ship off to the next group, apparently we got a move about to happen. Keandre Miller, Frank, we were just talking about him going to the Carolina Hurricanes, potentially. Nothing firm just yet, but Tim's been feeding stuff into my ear while we've been talking. But there is some rumors, per Elliot Friedman, that they're working on that. So could be big news as Carolina Hurricanes getting Keandre Miller. Talk about a situation for him to grow and be isolated a little bit. I think that would work out great for him. Out goes Brent Burns. In comes Keandre Miller.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about it. Not really a shock that the Rangers would move on. And Carolina, like, he fits what they want to do. He's super athletic. He skates so well. Their big thing that I think they're going to have to think about in Carolina is he a perfect fit for what we try and accomplish? Everything about what Carolina does is pressure, pressure, pressure at both ends of the ice. And can Miller play and fit within that Rod Brindamore scheme and structure? Every player acquisition that they make seems to be centered around that. And so if that's the path that they've gone down here, then, I'd be curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, very exciting, Frank. Always a pleasure talking with you. You're the best. We appreciate all your time on Bleacher Report. Have a good rest of your free agency period, and we'll talk soon, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
All right, that was Frank Seravalli. Tim, what do you think? We did 2 hours, a bunch of signings. We had some trades. Pretty eventful, all in all.
Yeah, more eventful than I was expecting, given what Frank laid out a couple of hours ago. And the Keandre Miller thing is just, I think it's a great fit. We know he was going to be gone from the Rangers. I think he's a great fit in Carolina. I think you're going to see a different version of him, and because the system around him is going to protect him a little bit more than they had in New York. So I'm very excited for him, and we'll see what else comes in today.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody for sticking with us for this start to the free agency period. I feel like we got a lot going on, but stick here at Bleacher Report. There's a lot of fun stuff to go on. We're going to kick it over to the next group for Tim Wurzberger and I from Dropping the Gloves podcast. We appreciate you sticking with us, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Cheers, everybody.
They tried guys like Adam Fox with him, just didn't really work out all too well. So I think especially for Carolina, they're getting a high upside player here with the physicality, the skating he has. It's just kind of putting that together, being a little bit more competent in his decision making. And if that goes a little bit of a ways, I think in the Canes case, you're getting a pretty easy middle pair guy here.
Well, then I'm hearing from the chat that there's no audio. So I'm going to give it a second. And okay, there we go. We're good.
Oh.
Thanks, guys, for keeping us locked and loaded and aware
Chat
of what's going on. Someone asked to tell the joke again, so I'll do it. I want to say congrats to the LA Kings for making the cup final and losing because they just signed Corey Perry. But if the people didn't hear, okay, at the top of the hour here, the Rangers are working on a K'Andre Miller to Carolina trade. So can I get your take on that again if the people missed it?
Yeah, I mean, in K'Andre Miller's case, a high upside player. This is somebody that in the Rangers system has worked at points, but other times been a bit of a frustration point for that team. In a lot of ways, I think the Canes could have added some more physicality to that defense, some more, a bigger body. K'Andre Miller definitely is that. When he is at his best, I mean, just a couple of years ago in the playoffs, I thought he was looking like a future top pair defenseman for this Rangers team. He was on that type of a trajectory before I think the last year kind of derailed his season a little bit. So I think especially in the Canes case, we'll see what the return is. Obviously, it could be gargantuan, but I think the player fit here is quite solid for the Canes, especially for a team that already has a lot of puck movers in that defense. K'Andre Miller can play that type of game, but be a little bit more reserved, stay back in the defensive zone while all the players on the Canes rush up the ice and do their thing.
John, any initial thoughts while we wait for the return?
Yeah, I mean, Nathan kind of said most of it there. I think we'll wait to see what the return is, and there is reports that they're working on an extension as well for K'Andre Miller to stay long-term in Carolina. We'll see if that materializes. But yeah, like you talk about the player where he was drafted and just, I would say the profile. I mean, it's a guy that every team wants. I mean, we're seeing all this money being handed out for guys that are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". K'Andre Miller brings that size, but he also brings that mobility. Like I look at some guys that were just drafted too. I think K'Andre Miller, he probably just needs that little bit of that fresh start. I think with Carolina, maybe being partnered with a guy like Slavin. I know they're both left shot and both probably on that left side, but I think just he probably needs a little bit more of that stability, and maybe that Carolina Hurricanes system overall just brings that stability, and Rod Brind'Amour can help him in that regard as well.
Yeah, speaking of Brind'Amour, you go.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, in John's point, I love that he mentioned the draft, because this last year we saw 0 defensemen drafted that were under 6 feet, especially earlier on in the draft in the second round. We saw a ton of teams going after mobile, physical, taller defensemen. So this is a profile that, like John mentioned, is making GM salivate out there. I'm sure in the return, it might be a little bit disappointing in terms of what he is, because I mean, this is probably where his value is at the lowest these last couple of seasons. But I love the risk here for the Canes, and it's not typically a defenseman they go for usually. So I'm interested to see the fit and how it works out.
Yeah, I know Rod Brind'Amour, he's always said you have to play for the Hurricanes, be able to play on either side. So I could see a Slavin and Miller pairing in the future, maybe Burns. I don't know. We'll see what happens if they re-sign Burns or not. But that was a shocker for me as well. I'm excited about that for the Canes. They always want to revolve their team around kind of strong defense, no matter what that looks like. They've had all kind of defensemen coming in and out. But I know I've heard speculation that, I mean, Miller's probably worth a first, right? Given what his upside has been. And last year with the Rangers, that was a disaster all around. You look at, I mean, their entire defensive core and kind of what their forwards were doing on defense, and it was just like incohesive. It was a disaster to watch. So I guess we'll see what happens there. But I can't imagine him not going for either a first and or like a high level prospect, right?
That's
well, they could flip that. They could flip that Dallas 2026 first that they got in the Rantanen deal, right? So maybe that pick's involved.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't be shocked. I mean, we heard a lot about how they wanted to be really active with those picks they acquired, so would not surprise me at all.
The gift that keeps on giving, I guess some might say, when it comes to the Rantanen trade. All right, I guess we can discuss Brock Boeser, one of the best goal-scoring wingers available in the free agent market, re-signed with the Canucks on a 7-year, $50.75 million contract. The deal is worth $7.25 million in average annual value, AAV, as the folks at home might know it by. What do you guys think about this? I feel like it was a little bit of a shocker that Boeser ended up back with the Canucks, right?
I mean, my goodness, it was a situation that I never really expected to happen with all the chat around the trade deadline and it supposedly being a bit of an issue between Boeser and the Canucks camp. It's pretty shocking to see this relationship arrive once again. But I think in Boeser's case, once the term was up there near 6-7 years, it was just a no-brainer for him to make. He seems like he still loves that Vancouver team. And we'll see what happens. But I think for the AV, it's pretty fair. The term might be a little bit of a question mark, but at the end of the day, if you get a good playmaker with Boeser, the goal scoring will be coming.
Now we will welcome in NHL insider and all-around legend, Frank Seravalli, to give us the latest live news as it pertains to this NHL free agency period. Frank,
Hey,
how
guys.
you doing? What's the latest?
Yeah, really good to be with you guys. And it's been kind of a wild first hour here where a lot of people were expecting, hey, it's going to be quiet. Well, we've already got two of the big four off the board in Gavrikov and Boeser, and then this K'Andre Miller trade materializing, still working on the return. It's actually somewhat slow to come by in some of those details. I'd imagine that there's a player involved that they haven't been able to contact yet, in addition to some draft capital. So, look, definitely always busy in the first hour. And as mentioned elsewhere, there's a lot of deals, other things still in the hopper, ready on the table to be fired off, because I think there's been lots of concerns about tampering, and teams certainly don't want to be the one that's made an example of so far. As mentioned, right as soon as the LA Kings landed Corey Perry, I was like, oh, hey, look, they're probably likely to be in on Joel Armia. That ends up materializing. Sounds like that's going to be a 2-year deal. And keep an eye on Cody Ceci as well in LA. So there's a lot sort of percolating behind the scenes, a lot written down in my notebook here that hasn't quite got across the finish line yet. And so that means also that we're going to have plenty to talk about over the next 2 hours.
Right. The tampering talk has been very strong. Where do you think the line is where it becomes like, I know there's teams that talk to players. It just is what it is. But at what point do you think the league considers it tampering?
Well, that's the tough part that everyone's been trying to figure out, Sarah, is like, where is that line and how do we all, begin to straddle that appropriately? Because the point I made, on our earlier stream with John Scott was, if everyone's cheating, then no one's cheating. But I think the Marner situation, I know rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way, because it's not just the Toronto Maple Leafs. If the Vegas Golden Knights, and it's a big if, but if they are guilty here and having engaged in talks about Marner's services, that it's not just their exclusive negotiating window that was aggrieved here. What we're also talking about is the fact that it became a closed market system, and that these other teams, 5, 6, 7, however many there are, that had legitimate and serious Mitch Marner interest, all of a sudden don't get a chance to even engage in conversation with him and talk about what a deal might look like. So I think there was a lot of disappointment. First off, we don't get many 100-point players that make it to market. And in this case, yet another reminder that they didn't.
100%. I kind of want to get your take on Brock Boeser too. It looked like that, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't going to happen the way it played out right now with Vancouver re-signing. Did you have any take or insight on that?
I do. Look, I was one of those people reporting for the last few days that the door had closed between Brock Boeser and the Canucks. And that is from people very close to Brock Boeser who have, been involved and prepped on talks along the way. I reported maybe 3-4 months ago that the Vancouver Canucks had put a 5-year times $8 million deal on the table for Boeser. And one of his big chief concerns was term. So he felt like he wasn't getting the term, leaving too much on the table when it comes to what the future market might look like for him. And then we had that deadline snafu where the Canucks probably honestly tried to and wanted to trade him. Sources indicated that they didn't even get a second-round pick back as part of an offer, and so they decided to keep him. But the problem was Patrick Allvin, their GM, as he was getting heat from fans and the marketplace saying, why couldn't you have at least moved Brock Boeser? What a failure this is. He kind of put it back on Brock and said, like, you wouldn't believe how bad these offers are. And that really rubbed a player who is so incredibly loyal the wrong way. He wanted to be there, wanted term, wanted security, wanted nothing more than to be a Vancouver Canuck, and really had these blinders on, and all of a sudden felt like he was wronged by the team that he had dealt with a lot, been through some incredibly emotional moments and tough times in his life with the passing of his father, just been an up and down tenure, had dealt with lots of drama, coaching changes, regime changes, this year, the Miller-Pettersson snafu, and even through all of that, he was the guy that was like, I only ever want to be a Canuck. And so to feel like that part had been pushed aside and he wasn't being respected, it was like, man, why would I go back there? And lo and behold, sometimes it's just hard to quit what you know. And that's where Brock Boeser ends up staying with the Canucks.
Yeah, do you think the Adam Foote head coach hiring helps in that at all? And you think that this kind of alleviates some of the drama for the Canucks, where it's like, you know what, this guy actually wants to stay. Let's build something here with the guys that actually want to be here?
Probably not. I mean, look, first off, Adam Foote coached the defense. Second, I would say that injecting Evander Kane into this equation certainly doesn't lessen the potential for drama. And third, I would say that more than anything, what the Canucks re-signing and stretching in remember the first offer, 5 times 8, to stretch to 7 times 725 is a significant change in total dollars that the Canucks put on the table. So when you add this new Boeser deal, plus the Kane addition, plus the Connor Garland extension at 6 times 6, all of that signals to me that the Canucks have had a very, very difficult time bringing in forwards that they think could be difference makers. And they were forced to pivot to, in their view, had to be at least some less desirable options to try and field a competitive team that they felt like they were striking out and needed to go to a cheap version of Evander Kane for 1 year to see if he can have a great contract year and be a fit, and to make sure you lock up Garland and then lock up Boeser, that I think the Canucks were probably in, facing a tough market to really be a more competitive squad.
100%. Now we're kind of shifting down south here. Jasmine asks, what players are still on the free agency board? There's a lot of Dallas Stars, right? Are you hearing anything about the Stars free agent situation right now?
I'm not. I mean, the Stars have such a shortage of money to go around that they did a lot of their work already when it comes to particularly getting Matt Duchene done at a longer term and locking him up with some security. Mikael Granlund was a guy that they really wanted to bring back, and that's not going to happen. But they still need to clear out and make some cap flexibility, and they need to. Cody Cece's another guy who isn't on this board, but obviously finished the year in Dallas. I'm surprised that we haven't seen any movement yet with Matt Dumba and or Ilya Lyubushkin. I thought Dumba was a perfect buyout candidate, clear off $2.3 million with the stroke of a pen and move on. But I'll add some intrigue here. The fact that the Stars haven't done that yet would probably signal to me that they've got something cooking, meaning like they know how they're going to fix their salary cap issue. And I'll add another one. The Florida Panthers seem to be in a pretty similar spot, because the first thing everyone said after the Marchand, Ekblad, and now Bennett re-signings was, well, they're going to have to offload someone. Wouldn't that just be Evan Rodriguez? And my understanding from teams that called yesterday after the Marchand deal was done was, hey, we're actually in a good spot. We don't need to move Rodriguez. So the Panthers, either they've got some big brains doing the calculating there that they're going to be able to figure out how to wedge everyone in, or they've got a ready-made deal baked for Rodriguez or someone else that they're going to be sending them elsewhere.
Yeah. Really makes you think about also the cap rising and how has that impacted this free agency period, if it has at all, because there's just been, it's kind of slow with the amount of free agents that have already been kind of picked off the board. But how has the cap spike kind of impacted all of this year?
Yeah, it's forcing us to rewire our brains and what we think are logical deals or deals that fit within the parameters that we know. And this chart is such a great example, Sarah, because at $88 million to stretch in a 3-year period of time to 113.5, that's a 24.8% jump. They said there would be no math, but a 24.8% jump means that let's take a look at that Connor Garland deal that he re-ups to stay in Van. Everyone's like, 6 times 6, Connor Garland, what are we doing here? If you actually rewire your brain and think about it from a different perspective, it's the same exact deal that he's playing under right now at 5 times 5 or 5 times 495 or whatever it is, just converted to what this new cap is. So we have to think in some different terms. And I'll tell you what, some teams are looking at this marketplace today, how thin it is, how few some of the impact guys are going to be. And they're saying, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to watch everyone else spend their money today. And I'm going to just try and figure out my needs in another way.
Like they finally learned their lessons. But Frank, thank you so much for the math lesson here. And thank you for all of the updates. We'll see you again soon. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
All right, guys. I saw a comment in here saying the Yezer plan needs to get going. I thought Miller was going to go to Detroit, and that was what I was kind of banging the drum on. But of course, Eric Tulsky and the Hurricanes snatch him. So I am wondering you guys' thoughts about the Yezer plan. Or have they done enough? Yeah, it is. Yeah, Carolyn's the best. She is the Kings reporter, and she has a lot to discuss when it comes to Corey Perry and co now. But we'll get into all of that. We've got you guys for an hour and a half more. So I wanted to kind of ask about the Yezer plan just because that's been on my mind. What do you think? Is there any moves left for Stevie to make? And if he doesn't do anything right now in this free agency period, should fans be disappointed?
I mean, in Detroit's case, I think it's an interesting one because they built in almost 2 different sections where they started out this rebuild going through so many draft picks, so many prospects, prioritizing that. And it seems like over the last few seasons, it's been way more in free agency. It's been trying to get these veteran additions and trying to almost escape that rebuilding territory by almost escaping it entirely. I think in Detroit's case, it's weird because I think they expedited that rebuild just slightly, where they still have some great pieces. Lucas Raymond is a favorite of mine. Maurice Sider, of course, is fantastic. I love me some Simone Evanson, Marco Casper, but there's not really, besides like Raymond, Larkin, these superstar players that can really push you into a different level. Like even Montreal that just made the playoffs this last year, you could argue that Nick Suzuki has kind of gotten into that territory, that Lane Hudson winning the Calder Trophy this last year, how good he was. In Detroit's case, it will be fascinating because to me, the biggest problem was the goaltending for them, and they go out and get John Gibson. So I don't think now they necessarily need any free agent additions. In fact, I would say, Steve, please stop making free agent additions because some of them have been a little bit iffy over the past few years. But I think they're in a territory where they can just go for another massive trade. On top of that, they still have a bit of cap space to work with. A lot of younger prospects that won't be able to get too many spots because of the veterans they've signed already. A big hot take of mine before, and this wasn't free agency wise, but more so a trade, that is that especially what we heard out of Erik Karlsson of Pittsburgh and all of the momentum that a trade might be happening there. Well, Pittsburgh want to go in a more rebuilding direction. We've heard more about Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell. I think for Detroit, Erik Karlsson would make a ton of sense, especially with Axel Sandin-Pellikka coming into the fold next year, having this unbelievable offensive defenseman, franchise-altering type of guy who has been there, done that, has shown how to succeed, especially for a guy like Axel Sandin-Pellikka. I'd love to have that as a mentor for him. So I think for the Red Wings, of course, they love their Swedish defensemen. I think that would be a pretty interesting fit. But in terms of the goaltending, that was the biggest thing I want them to focus on. And Gibson isn't a sure thing. He hasn't been amazing, especially playing starter minutes in a long time now. But I think Anaheim was kind of a weird situation for him. In Detroit, of course, getting a new change of scenery, getting a team that actually will hopefully play a little bit better in front of him could be very interesting. And I think for the Red Wings, just next year, though, is where things will get really, really complicated. Because if it doesn't get better for them, then I think things are just going to start to get a little bit feisty there with a fan base.
I agree. Like making a signing just to make a signing isn't it. That's why I love that they got Gibson. I think at the very least, you look at what you have and you say, okay, maybe he can be a backup, but I think he's going to bounce back in a big way when he has this kind of opportunity that he does. And it was tough being like he was the number one guy for so many years, and then he's behind this up and coming amazing goalie that the Ducks have. So I don't know, John, what are your takes? Do you think Gibson's enough, or do you think you'd like to see Carlson on the team too? I kind of like the Carlson take too.
Yeah, the Carlson take's interesting because the Swedish connection, as Graf said. But another guy that I would talk about is probably Bowen Byram. I know it's in division with the Buffalo Sabres, but if they're looking at the RFA market and they were looking at Keandre Miller, I mean, Bowen Byram makes a lot of sense. Like, I think Buffalo might still want to keep him. Obviously, they have more left shot than right. I think for Detroit, kind of alluding to what you said in terms of John Gibson, you want to make the guy feel comfortable in the net. Obviously, he's going to probably have more confidence playing for, I would say, a more competitive team, at least going into this year. I think Anaheim, there's so many question marks. We'll see what they do this offseason. But I think for Detroit, like, you probably want to add one or two more pieces. You kind of just showed on the board the potential forward group. Obviously, Patrick Kane's coming back. Great connection with DeBrincat. You've got Larkin. You've got Raymond. Is it enough to move the needle in that Atlantic division when you have the likes of Ottawa that just made the playoffs? Montreal squeaked in. You have Buffalo that's getting better. And then, of course, Boston, I mean, they just signed Tanner Jeannot to a contract I don't love, but they're trying to make additions to get back into the playoff picture. And then, of course, Toronto, Florida, and Tampa at the top. So it's a tough Atlantic division. You could make an argument that maybe it's going to be the toughest division going into the new year. So for Detroit, is it enough? Well, I think John Gibson's definitely going to be the upgrade. It's just a matter of health. And then obviously, is that defense strong enough in front of him? So I'd throw Bowen Byram in the hat. And I know Cody Cease is probably signing in LA. So the free agent pool in terms of defense just keeps getting thinner and thinner. But maybe a guy like Ryan Lindgren. I'm not sure. But there's probably some options out there just to make John Gibson more comfortable and probably a more competitive team. Maybe a wild card team. We'll see.
Wait, do you promise that the Buffalo Sabres are getting better? Can we get that on record? I want to hear that.
No, I mean, I think they're getting better. Well, here's the thing. Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power, I think that's probably the best defense duo in terms of like high ceiling talent in the Atlantic Division. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, we got a question from Jack D, and I've been asking myself this one a bunch. Who do you think the Ducks get? Because they're swimming, quacking even in cap space, and they were trying to go hard for Mitch Marner, and they have made some interesting moves, whether it's trading Gibson or they've done several things ahead of this free agency period. And of course, the Zegras trade that kind of unloaded a lot of general like franchise cornerstone feelings of, okay, this is going to be the direction our team goes in. They hired Quenneville. I don't know. Where are we at with the Ducks, guys?
I think Anaheim's a weird one because I thought they were going to be like a month ago. I thought before we heard all the rumors about Marner going to Vegas, I thought Anaheim was the sneaky team to end up going after him. Then a week ago, I'm like, okay, they're not going to get Marner. I wonder about Aaron Ekblad if he were to have left Florida. They had a ton of cap space with what Pat Verbeek loves on defense. I'm sure that would have been a transformative ad for them. But of course, signs in Florida anyways. So I think in Anaheim's case, a lot of the targets they were going to go after, a lot of the targets they were interested in, just haven't had the opportunity to come to them. I think even with all that said, though, I think they're still going to target a right defense, even though they have Jacob Trouba, they have Radko Gudas. I think they still, with what Pat Verbeek wants, he's still going to want to add some beef to that defensive core. I mean, as John mentioned before in the Gibson trade, Anaheim's in a weird spot where they're trying to progress, they're trying to get over that hump, but they're also trading a lot of skill to be able to do so. So it's kind of a give and take situation. But I think of what the Ducks have prioritized, what they wanted. I mean, if Cody Cease doesn't end up in LA, I think he might pivot to Anaheim potentially. I wouldn't be surprised.
I feel like, and this is the folly of, and what Frank was describing to us so eloquently with his information, is just that you can't assume that you're going to get Mitch Marner. You know what I mean? You have to kind of prepare for, there's so few free agents on the market. But at the same time, John, I want to get your take on this. There are so many players that they have already acquired that signing alert. Oh, we were just talking about Lindgren 4 by 4.5 million to Seattle. All
Wow.
right.
That's what I was reacting to. That's crazy.
All right.
We know Seattle wanted to add one more piece in that defense group and maybe slide Alexiak down. So Lindgren's, I mean, a good piece. It depends what version you're getting of Lindgren. Is it the Rangers version that was struggling so much, or could it be the Lindgren of 3 or 4 years ago when him and Fox looked like one of the best pairs in the National Hockey League? It's really, what version are you getting of Ryan Lindgren?
100%. I think Seattle has like a sound defensive structure. I want to see them get a little more offense, but they're working on it, I guess. It's been a little confusing for me where they make the playoffs and then it's kind of mid on mid on mid year after year. So I kind of like a sturdy defenseman type move. But you're right that we will see which version of him we get, but they've kind of over the past year signed a few sturdier players. So I like the direction they're going in that way with Botterill as the new GM now that Francis is kind of in the background.
I mean, I was going to say too that with them hiring Lambert as head coach, that is he is a Ryan Lindgren type of coach right there. I mean, it seems like Seattle is one of those teams that just feels like they lack that true identity. Earlier on, it felt like it was all about this intensity and speed and skill, and it feels like over the last couple of seasons they've really prioritized trying to get stronger, trying to get bigger, especially with some of their draft picks they end up making. I mean, Blake Fiddler in the second round from this last draft, big boy out of the WHL too. So it makes sense to me. I think in Lindgren's case, just getting any term whatsoever is kind of a success after John alluded to what the last couple of years have been like for him. I mean, this is somebody that, like Keandre Miller too, like in those playoff runs for the Rangers, those big long ones, Lindgren was such a force, such a dynamic player alongside, not dynamic, but such a minute eater alongside an Adam Fox, where you were getting a dependable physical force here. If he's able to be even 90% healthy, then I think he could live up to that contract. It's just a matter of how washed is this guy already, because a lot of the injuries, all the concerns there, I don't think they were really alleviated in Colorado. He was okay there, but didn't quite rebound like I thought he had the potential to be. So we'll see in Seattle's defense. They have a wide open decor. So especially if they are to trade at a player like Alexiak, that would give him a player like Lindgren quite a bit of opportunities. So we'll just wait and see. Obviously not going to play over a player like Vince Dunn, but I think it's just a physical force. If he rebounds just a little bit, then I think 4.5 is pretty fair.
Yeah, especially given the cap rising. I mean, you can kind of take or leave a cap hit like that, and you don't have to feel the responsibility of playing him all these minutes because he commands so much of the cap. I guess I think I'm talking myself into this because it will give him like a runway to see if he is the player that he has shown flashes that he can be.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, we talked about it like this. There's not much supply here in this free agent class, especially on day one here. So Ryan Lindgren was probably getting a lot of offers, talking to a lot of different teams. Like, I think we're talking ourselves into this because we're thinking, okay, Ryan Lindgren changes scenery, defensive structure in Seattle, the type of coach is there too. But at the end of the day, we could look back on this and go, ooh, 4 years, 4.5 for someone that maybe gets buried in the fourth or third pair. Sorry. So I would not be surprised if we see some more signings that are going to be like mistakes. Like, we haven't talked about it yet, but we do got to zero in at some point on the Tanner Jeannot contract because like things like that. I mean, there's going to be mistakes today, and there's going to be teams overpaying by 2 or 3 million. That's why I think we were so surprised by the Brock Boeser situation, because it seemed like he was out. I mean, Frank even alluded to that he thought Vancouver was out on Boeser. And with Carolina and Columbus and with some of these teams with so much cap flexibility, you think they're going to be offering 9.5, which maybe is what Ehlers gets. But I think that's where we're seeing an example like Lindgren here is he definitely got a nice contract for himself, even through all the struggle.
100%. And I think it was so interesting of Frank to say that this might be a time where GMs kind of finally wake up and say, all right, I'm not going to overpay this guy, which is ironic because the cap is rising and people that need more players have money. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to spend it all in one place now that it matters. And now they're setting kind of a new market. So I guess this deal kind of helps set the new, I mean, I want to see kind of what Miller ends up extending to and what someone like Cody Ceci, he's always a good indication of the market. So I'm waiting on that one. But before we get any new live news coming in, we should do perfect fits, which we will do a little fun game here where we see who we think are the best players still available that might fit in situations where teams desperately need them. Are we ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right. Okay. I know John you have like some things in the back. Okay. Toronto. We want to start with Toronto.
Yeah, sure.
Who is your perfect fit left in Toronto right now?
So yeah, this is a bit of like a family connection, but also what Toronto's looking to add into the bottom six. It's Brandon Tanev. So I just think in terms of Chris is already with Toronto, of course. I think with Brandon Tanev, it'd be perfect to kind of unite the brothers together. I think whether Brad Treliving's talked about different words like snot, I just feel like that's kind of the definition of Brandon Tanev. So that was the fit for me in Toronto in the bottom six. I think they're still going to look for a top six forward, but I think that's going to be via trade. If they make another addition or two, I think it's in the bottom six, and Brandon Tanev for me is a fit.
I thought you meant you were like the third Tanev brother. I was like, I definitely see that. But I'm here for that either way. I think they need the Leafs are going to need it's slim pickings for sure, and they want kind of. I know Berube's been really good, and so is the new GM Brad T with the fits that are kind of more vibey, you know what I mean? And you look at Tanev here, he's bringing nothing but the vibes. I like that. I think that kind of gives incentive for the entire family to go off. I've loved Chris Tanev's fit in wherever he's been. I think he's been such an effective player wherever over the
so
years.
underrated.
Exactly. No matter what he brings, such a good balance of defense on. I'm talking about Chris now, but the balance on defense everywhere. So I feel like making him happy and also a lower amount of number for a player like really does help the Leafs in this situation right now. Now we can go to Detroit. Now that Miller's off the board, who do we got?
Yeah, so it's funny, Sarah. We were talking about Detroit adding a couple defensemen, maybe one defenseman specifically. So it does sound like Cody Ceci may go to LA, but I did think that if there was another fit for Ceci, it was in Detroit. I just think, and it's funny because it'd be funny to see Ceci and Hall on the same team once again, just like the good old Toronto days. But I just thought with what Detroit's got right now, they've got a couple offensive guys in Sider and Gustafson. They probably want to add one more piece. That's why we were even saying maybe like the Ryan Lindgren or Keandre Miller. Well, I added CC into the mix too because I just think this market is so thin. Detroit wanted to add on that back end once again. If it's not CC, there's probably other options, but I just figured that as kind of that 4 or 5 option on that Detroit defense, kind of to make John Gibson more comfortable as we talked about. CC is just, he eats shots for a living. So that's the one thing he does well.
And when you look at the,
can I mention, by the way, guys, you mentioned getting a defenseman potentially for Detroit. I'm curious because one name that's kind of been floated out there is a right defenseman. There aren't many available now, with so many being signed already. But one of the bigger ones that's younger, that's also big, is Nick Perbix, and of course was drafted by Tampa back in 2017 when Steve Eisman was, of course, the main guy there in Tampa. I'm curious if there's a potential fit there. I don't think he would be a very long-term high AV guy. He's pretty under the radar in Tampa Bay. There has been some decision-making moments where you kind of leave a little bit wanting, but with the physicality he has, with how I think smart he still has as a player, especially defensively, I'm curious about Detroit. Very curious. We'll see.
That's a good shout. If like I said, if CC goes to LA, that's probably the pivot graph. So that's a good shout.
So, yeah, that's a great call, and that seems like fair money situational. Yzerman is the kind of guy that will make I think he needs to make less free agent signings, like you said, when it comes to kind of the bigger, older names. It's like, let's get something fresh in here. I like that. And I also like when you look at the problems with the Red Wings last year before kind of everything got magically fixed in the middle of the year with the coaching trade. It's not that simple, of course, but they just needed more puck movers in the zone. I just feel like you need to move the puck from zone to zone way better, sustain your zone, no matter if you're a forward or a defenseman, whatever your position is, but they need more puck movers. So I would like to see maybe a CC in there. I think he can get it. The transition game, I will say with him, he gets the puck moving. So he could be a good fit there, you know? We can move on to San Jose now, where they are once again swimming in cap space with looking for somebody to sign.
Yeah, so my perfect fit for the San Jose Sharks, and I figure they're going to talk to other big names and maybe they talk to Ehlers, but my perfect fit for them in terms of looking for that second line center behind Celebrini is Pius Suter. I think they added Wenberg recently. They're trying to kind of basically stopgap or kind of put that a little bit of the holdover until they're ready to be a contender, ready to be back into the playoffs. But I think that's a couple years away. Suter, really solid two-way, solid defensively, kind of that mature aspect, kind of a safe gap. Also, for some of the younger players that might be a little mistake prone, I should say. So I figured Suter, a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense, and also if he was to get a big payday, Sharks have plenty of money to spend. So that was my reasoning for the Sharks going after Suter.
That's fantastic. I feel like now that Boeser is signed with the Canucks, there's no way they can get both of them. I mean, this isn't Bill Zito, so we will see. But I like that fit there, especially without like
oh wow, that's a pretty good contract.
Yep, the Blues have signed Nick. Oh God, guys, I always get this wrong. Can you do his last name for me? Because I
Nick
don't
Bouchard.
want
No, Sarah, we need you to say it. We need you to try
I get
this out.
clowned on my own podcast for this all the time. I know who it is. Don't worry. But they have signed him to a
Just say
two-year. Yes, they've signed Nicky B to a 2-year, $1.75 million AAV contract. That, yeah, that is under $2 million. That would be kind of my range and that's a good contract in my eyes. What do you guys think?
St. Louis is making moves today, eh? I mean, you had the big Zach Bolduc trade, which I like a lot for Montreal, but it seems like they're really trying to change up that forward group too. I mean, they're another team that's drafted a ton over the past few years, has had a lot of younger pieces come on, but seems to be another team that, again, wants to be... The big thing is that everybody wants to be heavier to play against, harder to play against. They all want to be the Florida Panthers. Nick Bukestad, big boy, and especially as just like a pretty perfect complementary third-line center, somebody that can be good on the power play, can bang and crash. I mean, especially at the AAV, under $2 million. I mean, Bukestad isn't as good as he has been before, but is still pretty reliable, and you can rely on him to still play a bunch of games. So I think in St. Louis's case, it will be interesting because I think they up the middle had a bit of a hole in that bottom six, but Bukestad, certainly if he's healthy, will be able to get that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Graf. I think also when you look at the trade itself, I'm with you. I liked it for Montreal. I thought it was a win-win in terms of what they're trying to get out of it. Probably Bolduc almost being a 20-goal scorer last year. The value is definitely there for Montreal and a bit of a homecoming. But when you look at the Blues, what they just did, trade plus this, you're adding Bukestad, who I think can bounce back. Like he only scored 8 goals last year, but 6'5", and kind of what you alluded to. Everyone's just going for the size right now to kind of match what's been a success point in recent years. But if you look at what they added in terms of cap hit too, you kind of get Bukestad and Mailloux and only lose Bolduc in the process. I shouldn't say only lose Bolduc, but you're kind of replacing some of that offense and then that presence from Bukestad with the size. So is Bukestad anything more than a third liner? Probably not. He might even be the fourth line center for the St. Louis Blues this year. But I think the value wise, especially on a down year, when you're a team that's trying to kind of rise or maybe get into the playoffs, you're always trying to buy low. 1.75 for me is really good business from Doug Armstrong.
Yeah, Armstrong, I've really liked some of his subtle moves over the past few years, especially when the team has been kind of handcuffed with certain contracts that they can't really get out of. And some of the players are really good. They don't want to get them out of them anyway. But it's like, I've loved the offer sheets. They've been pretty aggressive with that, but they haven't made like lofty trades or signings that they had felt like they can't get out of after years of doing that. So I've kind of liked the way they've walked themselves out of that, and they've kind of built around. And I mean, the Montgomery head coach signing really made an impact. I've loved kind of seeing them tweak subtly and doing like unexpected off the grid moves that have ended up in, I mean, they were the hottest team of the last few weeks of the regular season, and it paid off in almost a trip to the second round. So I am really curious on where they're at next season, and I really like this move for them if they kind of have to shore up the depth.
Good move.
I mean, in St. Louis's case, I also got to say, too, I think they've handled their expiring contracts pretty well. Joel Hofer was somebody that we were speculating could have been an offer sheet candidate. There was a lot of offer sheet talk and chat around this summer that hasn't really come to pass yet, but Hofer was one of the bigger ones, especially on the goaltending side. And that was kind of an interesting point, too, that we haven't really touched on yet, but with the John Gibson trade earlier, the goalie market is extremely thin, and Hofer was somebody that is a younger goaltender, hadn't really come up as a starter yet, but I think had the potential to do so. So I looked at a team like Edmonton that has really wanted to change the DNA in their goaltending, and might, just because of how thin this goaltending situation is, especially with Gibson gone, genuinely have to run it back next season. So I think in the Blues case, they've done a lot of smart things to keep the good players on that roster. They haven't traded Kyrou yet. We'll see if that actually ends up happening. But I think in the Blues case, I mean, they were just a couple of bounces away from from being in the second round this last year. They're a team that was unbelievable with Montgomery. That's, to me, one of the more underrated coaches out there. So I like the direction they're still heading in. Even if a couple of moves have been questionable here and there, they like to replace it with some pretty good moves.
Great point about the goalie market, and the Oilers trigger me so bad with that. They've had 2 years. They knew exactly what they had with their goaltending situation, and they had 2 years to change it. So the market isn't good right now, and they deserve the market not to be good for them.
They trigger me too. Because the goaltending is horrible and it's awful until they face my Dallas Stars. And then it's the best thing of all time until after they beat us, and then they go to the next team and then they get smacked.
All right, well, we'll get back to the goalie market, I am sure. But for now, let's get into the Columbus Blue Jackets perfect fit here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for the Blue Jackets, again, a lot of cap space. I wonder if they just add more depth. And of course, they were in the conversation for Noah Dobson, maybe trading Dmitry Voronkov. I could still see them being part of a massive deal. So I think they're going to try to solidify some depth or maybe add a piece to the top six. So I have former teammate of Sean Monahan, Andrew Mangiapane, joining him in Columbus. I think if they're missing a lot of the players here in the early parts of the market, Mangiapane could be a guy that's up for a huge bounce back year. He only scored 14 goals last year, so I'm looking at him as maybe a potential to reunite with Monahan on that line. But I think Columbus, if they are looking back into the forward market, I think Andrew could be a target for them.
I was going to mention too, with that, John, I like that a lot because they just, in that Charlie Coyle deal they made, went after a player like Miles Wood that is all speed on the wing. And Mangiapane is absolutely in that same range where it's just so much speed, so much intensity. So I think in terms of the fit, I like that a lot.
Yeah, now that they locked Provorov up, it's kind of time to make the Mangiapane-esque deal. I like that a lot, and I think someone like Monahan deserves that. He's been awesome on the Blue Jackets and just an awesome guy. So it's cool to see them be where they were at last year with a chance, and now they're only going to get better and better from here on out. I just love the energy there.
I was going to say, you guys are allowed to disagree with me.
No,
yes. You're allowed to get on my case.
You're just too good.
Unfortunately, your takes are so good.
Nice.
I'm looking for a hole in your takes. Maybe with the Ducks, with the amount of cap space they have. Give us your Ducks pick, and I'll try to disagree with it.
On.
All right, so maybe I got to make my hot take even hot take-ish here. But if the Ducks just want to splurge on crazy money here, let's not overthink it. Nikolai Ehlers. You know what? I think there's so many, we could go through so many teams that are going to go after Ehlers, especially with him being the big fish left. But if Pat Verbeek really wants to splurge and go crazy on a free agent, it would be Nikolai Ehlers.
Okay, my question's why? Because they aren't going to be competitive in the next 3 years. I feel like this is a guy that would be a great second line player for a team that's almost there but needs a few more power play goals to get them to maybe the cup final. So why the Ducks?
Yeah, I guess. Well, there's a couple reasons, and I'm with you. I think there's been some speculation that Ehlers wants to join a contending team, a competitor. So yeah, the Ducks are probably not a fit in that aspect. If he is trying to choose competition and contention over money, but I will look at the Anaheim Ducks more so and what maybe they can convince Ehlers to join. And that's a rising team. That's a team that they just added playoff experience. And Chris Kreider, they already have Killorn on the roster. So they have a lot of guys that have joined that younger core. Maybe they can convince Ehlers that he's kind of that star player that they're missing. They also were reported to be aggressive at maybe pursuing Mitch Marner if he did reach the open market. So I'm just thinking, okay, if they missed out on Mitch Marner, they're still pretty upset about it. Who's that next big fish? Well, Boeser's off the board, so let's go Ehlers. So that would be my reasoning. I am with you. I think maybe this is more of a perfect fit for the Ducks rather than Ehlers himself. But I think the Ducks would be the team that would maybe step forward with 3 or 4 million more than that contending team has to offer. But as we've kind of talked about, Carolina maybe is that healthy mix of like that contending team that also can spend a lot of money on Ehlers.
Yeah, and Carolina kind of knows that, though, so maybe they will try to offer less money, and he'll go with the more money option. There's nothing wrong with that, and Anaheim is going to be competitive in a few years. If they sign him long-term, it's like maybe in it for the long haul. I saw reports from our guy Frank, who said Ehlers wants to be somewhere warmer that is kind of less on the radar, which, you know what? I kind of love and respect a player just coming out and saying that, or maybe his agent saying that, or whatever it is. But you're allowed to want that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that fits the vibe that he wants. And then I guess it's kind of who's going to sign him for the most term, who's going to sign him for the most AAV. Where does he like the most? Players are allowed to pick where they want in free agency. It's one of the few times they're able to do so, right?
100%. Cash out, Ehlers, cash out.
Yeah, now he's got kind of more leverage than he maybe even anticipated with everybody gone. So thanks, Bill Zito, once again.
There you go.
All right, we got one more team on the board here with perfect fits. Who do you got? Montreal is a really interesting place headed into this year.
So yeah, this might be the hot take on this list for perfect fits. And keep in mind, this was before we knew the trade of Zach Bolduc going to the Montreal Canadiens. So maybe this affects Montreal's mindset if they do still want to acquire a center or a top 6 forward. But I have the hot take of, let's take a bet on Evgeny Kuznetsov in Montreal. If he's making the return to the National Hockey League, there was rumors in the past that when he did go to Carolina that Montreal was interested. So maybe the Habs can do a buy low here. It doesn't take too much to sign him. And he did have about a point per game last year in the KHL. So maybe Kuznetsov can be a guy that plays with Davidoff. We'll see. But that's my hot take for this one.
That would be so much fun. I mean, we've been looking at Montreal and their center situation quite a bit this offseason. It will be interesting because Bolduc was a center as a draft prospect, played center basically his entire career in the QMJHL. Then once he went pro, obviously not as many spots up the middle, so he transitioned to wing. That's how he's been playing for St. Louis all this time. So I don't think it's a guarantee by any means that a player like Bolduc is able to come up as a middle 6 centerman there immediately. Of course, you already have the question marks of Kirby Dach and what his health is going to be long term. I just, even though I would rather take the bet than like overpay for what would have been maybe like a Sam Bennett if he were available if I'm Montreal. It's not something where you're all that easy about having him as like a second line center coming in. So I think for Montreal, I mean, this is kind of like you said, a low stakes kind of move, but I could see pretty low AAV. Kuznetsov trying to make it happen, and like you said, around Demidov could be really fun.
100%. I really like the vibe with Suzuki had such a great season, and kind of the big players that are going to be their core for years to come are emerging. So giving them help and like a veteran who's been there before is a great idea. All right, so recapping there, we still got, it makes us see we got some stuff on the board here that anything could potentially still happen, and it's not like every single free agent is off the table. So thank you for giving us some hope that we can still have some interesting times here, John.
Of course. Yeah, no, the Ehlers one might not come till tomorrow, but I think he's going to sign probably in the next few days. It might be a massive contract, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Ehlers not signing tomorrow makes me think he's going to sign with the Canes because they like to negotiate down to the bone. I feel like they just go back and forth with the team's or a player's camp. So it's giving Canes, but we'll see. All right, so you got to recap: Brandon Tanev with the Leafs, CC with the Wings, Suter with the Sharks, Mangiapane with the Blue Jackets, Ehlers with the Ducks, Kuznetsov with the Habs. We'll see if any of this pans out, and I feel like you deserve a prize if any of it does, because these are, in fact, great fits for these teams.
Appreciate it. You didn't hate on me too much, so I appreciate it.
I tried. I tried my best.
I know you pushed back on the Ehlers one, so I'll give you that.
We had one. You're too sensible, John. You're too correct, man. Get out of here.
Your takes were reasonable, so now we have to pivot to very hot takes in our Hear Me Out portion of this live stream. So we are surprising each other with our Hear Me Outs here, where we do not know what the other person's going to say. Mine, unfortunately, got a little bit mangled, but I guess we will pivot and we will persevere. So what we're going to do here is name one take that we want to see happen that's kind of a surprise to the other people in the chat and see how the others react. I had the Ezra plan. Sorry guys, I pronounce it like Ezra plan. I think Ezra plan needs to get a move on this offseason, or it's going to be left in the dust. I'm kind of sick of being patient. They've had cap space. I'm sick of signing Tarasenko's. I'm glad they didn't. I'm sick of them signing the players that would make more sense on an already competitive team. I want to see big names that are still young go to this team. I threw out K'Andre Miller. Unfortunately, he got swept up by the Carolina Hurricanes, and we are still looking for a return on that. So I'm interested in your take on this one.
I mean, with the Red Wings especially, they have 17 million still in money to work with right now. I mean, this Red Wings team is in a curious spot where I actually do think that going for trades at this stage is a better position with how many picks they have, how many prospects they have to work with. I think that's what they should be doing rather than overpaying for, especially in this market. I mean, I'd love a Nikolai Ehlers if that were to come to pass somehow, but that's probably the only one that I think makes the Red Wings substantially better and I think really fits their needs. So I think for Detroit, I mean, I honestly kind of agree with this take. It's in a position where I don't think for Detroit as much like inside the management. I know how really key they are on Yzerman and how much they believe in that system, but I think for the fans, for especially general NHL fans, I feel like Yzerman is already starting to get a little bit of heat towards him. So I think this next year, like we talked about earlier in the Atlantic Division, it's going to be a bloodbath. But I think out of everybody, Detroit needs to make it the most.
No, I mean, it makes sense to me. I was going to say, just like part of this topic, but just a bigger topic, maybe we should need to stop calling like GMs like certain plans. Like the Shannon plan didn't work in Toronto. The Yzer plan is not working in Detroit. No, but I like it. Like I said, I think the Atlantic Division is so fascinating for me because you have these three, well, Boston's kind of fallen out, but might fall back in. But those three teams have been solidified in that top spot in the Atlantic for so long that it's been so hard for these teams to break through. So for me, Detroit, like they've been knocking on the door for so long. So it's one of those things that I think Red Wings fans are kind of giving up on Stevie Y, but he was also such a presence as a player for the organization. So no, I like it. I just think Detroit is due a couple moves and we'll see how big they are.
Yeah, and I know the urgency to do something can often bite a team in the butt. And I like what Frank said, that teams are kind of taking a step back on that. But then you look at how Bill Zito has been able to be aggressive with his own players because he got them in the first place. It's like you got to kind of see the value of a player here and there and snag them. So I don't know. And I like how the Golden Knights are always able to pull off some trade. They got Jack Eichel via trade. They got Mark Stone via trade. Now they got Mitch Marner via trade. It's like there's possibilities that you can unlock without having to do a free agent signing in the free agent period, right?
Yep.
So,
Show some creativity, Stevie. Let's do this.
Yeah, I want to see creativity. Exactly. So I want to go to your hot take now.
All right, so this one also a little bit changing because of free agency, but not too much, so I'm happy about that. Originally, my bold take was that Marner was going to go to Vegas, but it was going to be a 2-year contract. We were hearing a lot about how Marner specifically wanted to go for like a lower, shorter-term deal with the cap rising so much he wanted to bet on himself. Ultimately, I think he just wanted to sign long-term in Vegas. Good fit, so I don't really disagree with that. My new hot take, though, with that out of the way, is I think Nashville, especially with all these first signings out of the way, will be one of the biggest spenders going forward. I mean, we heard what Nikolai Ehlers has wanted. I would not be shocked if Nikolai Ehlers ends up in Nashville with the sunny weather, not a ton of attention on him. It's not the most competitive team in the world, but I could see a situation where Ehlers is convinced of the case. Trotz is trying to go as crazy as possible with this offseason already, so I wouldn't be surprised there. And I think on top of that, on top of a big forward like a Nikolai Ehlers, I think we're going to see Nashville be really aggressive on the right defenseman in this market. I think Nick Perbix makes a ton of sense for what Trotz wants in his defenseman, big boys, but younger, like they just got Nick Hague from Vegas. Pretty similar type of archetype there. So I think in Nashville's case, especially with the decent amount of cap room they have to work with, they're in a position where I want to see them get a little bit younger, get a little bit more in a rebuilding direction. But I know how Barry Trotz operates. He's going to want to make that team more competitive, and I see them making some big money moves.
Do you think they should? I know the take is that they will, but do you think they should?
Absolutely not. I mean, you look at this is my big thing is that there is almost no rebuilding teams over the next year over the next couple of years when you have players like Gavin McKenna and Landon DuPont coming in the next couple of NHL drafts. Like Pittsburgh and the Islanders feel like the only two teams that want to suck these next couple of seasons. The Predators, I think, could be in a pretty good position, but they, of course, even when they get a high draft pick at 5th overall, they go for a Brady Martin who's a lot more projectable, not the huge upside swing. So I don't even know who they would select if they had the chance of Gavin McKenna 1st overall, maybe not even him. Yeah. I think in Nashville's case, though, they just want to be as competitive as possible. They want to be as much of a pro team as possible. So even though I want to see them get a lot younger, I just don't think that's going to happen.
You know what? I'm especially on board with your take because everybody always talks about right now the hot talk of the town is the Panthers having the tax situation that they do, but the Nashville has the same exact situation when it comes to taxes. So they have the power to potentially spend a lot of money. Why don't they? I mean, why don't they? Me and Barry Trotz's brain. He's just doubling down on exactly what he's doing. So I feel like that is very possible, and for better or for worse.
Yeah, players love to play in Nashville. You saw it last offseason with the Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, Jonathan Marchessault signings. So I think
Ryan
with just
O'Reilly.
how desirable, how desirable they are as a destination, it just makes a lot of sense.
John, Tanev just signed with Utah, 3-year deal.
Oh, you're breaking my heart,
2.5 million
Sarah. You're
AAV.
breaking my heart. You're breaking my heart over here.
The brothers will not be reunited. Does anybody have an initial reaction to that one?
I don't think Toronto was going to go as high as 2.5. So I think that's the reasoning on that. And plus the 3 years, like I think it was probably going to be in the ones for Toronto. So anything above 2, I understand why he goes to Utah. But yeah, Utah, again, they're looking, we just talked about Nashville being aggressive, trying to bounce back. Utah's another team like that. I know Ryan Smith is all business. So Brandon Tanev makes sense to me. But yeah, we'll see what Utah does in a bigger sense. But I think it's a fair deal for the production. I mean, 10 goals if you can score a little bit more, but in terms of the style of play as well.
That's where Michelli is in the lineup right there. They just traded him to Toronto, which I like that quite a bit for the Leafs in terms of like a playmaking, rebounding upside there. But Utah, another team, wants to get bigger, wants to get stronger. But Tanev is somebody that, I mean, even with that, is such a character, such a unbelievable dude in that locker room. I mean, when he was traded to Winnipeg, it seemed like almost immediately everybody on that team instantly just fell in love with him. I mean, I think in Utah especially, he's going to be a fan favorite immediately. He always is. So I'm not surprised to see that happen.
Yeah, your point about Ryan Smith, too. I'm just happy that this team is aggressive and is trying to stay relevant. That's all we can ask for. Not all we can ask for, but it's what I
Arizona
want to ask for. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm happy they're staying relevant. Let's go to the chat. Do you guys have any takes about the Tanev signing? Do you have any questions you want to ask? Anything you want to announce? You've duped me a few times, I have to say, when I'm glancing over here. But
has McDavid gotten traded? Let's ask the
chat. It's looking like it.
But I was going to say, just talking about Utah quickly, and I like the Tanev signing. They're one of the teams that are eligible for any kind of offer sheet. And I don't know if we're going to jump back to it before I hop off, but it's funny, Nathan, like my hot take was going to lead right into yours. And it was just like, I'm waiting for the first offer sheet to drop. Like, I think there's speculation out there about Bowen Byram maybe, but Utah would be a team like Ryan Smith. There's a lot of speculation about him just going big this offseason. They already did the Paterka addition. Like, that could have been an offer sheet. They went for a trade instead. So this conversation's all tied together. Maybe they offer sheet Bowen Byram. I mean, maybe, but
they didn't have to give any picks in the Paterka trade. So why not?
So they still have it. But yeah, I think Utah's going to be one of those teams that still do something big here.
Yeah. And they knew what they needed to do. They knew they needed a little more seasoned scoring, and it looks like they are pulling out the stops to do so. So I don't think the Tanev acquisition really puts them out of anything, right? They're gonna try to make it happen. They were close last year too. There were moments where you saw maybe they could make a playoff run happen, and the West is kind of, the bottom of the West is a little more wide open. So it's like, if you just make those few tweaks, you could squeeze into the wild card spot, and they were a threat to do so a few times. They needed to score more, so they're coming back with some scoring. I like it. Our Pred's cooking. We'll see what type of food they're cooking. We'll see if it's
Barry, it's put up or shut up time.
All right, John, you got your hot take ready?
Yep. I already hinted at it a little bit, but I can get into more detail when I think.
We got a teaser. Thank you.
Yeah, got a little bit of
give
teaser.
us the full thing.
So I think there's going to be 3 offer sheets accepted, 3+. I think this is going to be the summer of offer sheets. Last year we had 2 from the same team, obviously. I hinted at 1. I think obviously Bowen Byram could be a candidate, but I think there's probably others. Maybe Marco Rossi. I know Nashville's been in conversation of maybe Rossi, so we'll see. Those are a couple of candidates, but 3 offer sheets. Let's see it this summer.
Okay, so the over-under is 2.5 here.
Yeah, I like that over-under. I'm taking the over.
John likes that there's no Matthew Nyes offer sheet either.
Yeah, I can joke about it. Nyes is
exactly.
Nyes is safe.
I mean, you see how well it worked out in St. Louis. That altered their franchise, and it was what they could do with what they had, and they could handcuff another team in the process. I love the drama there with that, and I think it's not just to be petty. It's to make a move that makes your team better. So, John, thank you so much for your take. I like it. I want the offer sheet discourse to start now. Where is it? Hello, people. Yes. John, thank you so much for stopping by our little broadcast, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Crab. Thanks, BR. Keep buzzing in the comments. Cheers, guys.
Please.
John's correct there with the buzzing in the chat. You guys have been awesome today. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the BR live stream for free agency. I mean, I think we've got a good spread so far, Sarah, in terms of like the signings, the trades. Even though it hasn't been unbelievable, unfortunately, so many guys got re-signed yesterday that I kind of wasn't expecting craziness. But we've seen, I think, a little bit more action than I was expecting.
Yeah, we're about to recap it all, but first we want to welcome in our dear friend Cole, friend of the stream, friend of BR, friend of the chat, and we're gonna get hello. There he is.
Welcome.
How you doing today,
Yes.
Cole?
Good. I was expecting honestly some worse moves by some GMs. I feel like everyone's been relatively smart today.
Cody
What's your
CC hasn't
favorite?
signed yet.
Yeah, period.
Yeah, dude, I'm a Red Wings fan. When I saw you guys talk about that, I was looking it up. I haven't seen the money yet. I'm hoping it's 1 by 1. Really.
What do you want?
It's probably not.
What do you want the Wings to do most right now?
Honestly, for me, I would love a Marco Rossi trade. Kind of unite the two Austrian Marcos would be pretty sweet. And we really do have a hole, I think. 2C, Casper could move to the wing. I'd like basically, like you guys were trying to talk about with Yzerman, I think you guys alluded to it. Red Wings need to do something bigger this offseason, I think, to get over the hump, especially when you look at how good Montreal is getting all of a sudden. Ottawa just made the playoffs. The Atlantic's going to be very competitive. So as a Wings fan, yeah, we got to do something to kind of propel us into playoff contention.
100%. All right, we got a new friend entering the chat to talk all things free agency and trades. Frank Seravalli, welcome back. We have a bunch of questions for you now that. Never mind. We will see him later. That means something's probably happening,
Busy.
guys.
Yep.
You know what that means.
You
We
get a
got Cody
text.
Cece's on deck. So we'll look to see what's happening there. But let's recap a little bit what has happened so far and what has happened in the last hour that this has gone on. We got let me refresh my page because it feels like things are happening at the minute. We haven't talked about the Jeannot trade yet, or the signing. Hello.
Yeah,
Me.
John was really wanting to talk about that.
Yeah,
We just didn't
yeah.
get the opportunity to. What do you guys think at 5 years for Tanner Jeannot? I mean, I honestly, with this free agent market, I was kind of expecting something silly like that. That's kind of like Cole said, the only unbelievably weird and strange signing that's been made so far. Knock on wood. But I mean, at the same time, the Bruins giving 5 years to Tanner Jeannot, are we that surprised, really, at the end of the day?
It's like they were doing so well. They had to do something to mess it up.
They had drafted James Higgins. They got to go for Tanner Jeannot.
I feel like, to me, it seems like they immediately just wanted to replace Trent Frederick, and they got, in my opinion, like a worse version for almost the same price. So it seems kind of reactionary, but we'll see. Maybe it could prove us all wrong. But
It's kind of like death taxes overpaying for this type of player. But you know what? I mean, it does make, with the cap rising every year now on the year, it's going to look pretty decent at the end of the day. I mean, he isn't getting any younger. There's a wear and tear when it comes to a player like this, but at the same time, they kind of have the room to do it, and somebody will trade for him at the deadline. I mean, you see the bread and butter of a team like the Lightning has been to do something like that. So maybe that's where Sweeney's head's at. I've loved his draft, honestly. That's been a good bounce back for him. So I'll cut him a little slack on this one, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom 6 was a priority. Like Cole said, I think basically getting that type of Frederick replacement, something that is a bigger body in the left wing, something that can throw some hits, has some decent speed. I mean, I kid about the contract. I think Jeannot was pretty good, actually, in a fourth line role for LA, right? When he had those limited minutes, when he was put up against lesser competition, he just go out there and bang and crash, keep the game simple. And, you know, he's not somebody that's going to overwhelm you by any means. He's not going to be this unbelievable personality that just takes over the game like a Matthew Tkachuk type of thing. But in the Bruins case, I think they just need a little bit more speed, a little bit more intensity, and they get that here. I still want to see them improve that center situation because it's kind of weird to me right now, but that's more so probably a trade down the line or a Marco Rossi trade potentially.
Yeah. Okay. Now Frank is ready for us, folks. So I'm sure there's something on deck here that we can discuss. The man of the hour is about to re-enter the chat. Frank, hello. What's the latest?
Oh man, it's been obviously a very busy 2+ hours here, and still lots more to come. I mentioned when we first connected that there's lots of deals that I think are set to come out in the 3 to 4 o'clock range that Look, I think there's also a bunch of deals that are pretty close. Obviously, some of these are a little bit further down the board in terms of, a top 75, if you're thinking about it, some depth pieces that teams can add to their lineup. But I'll say a couple things. The center market has been incredibly thin. It was thin to start the day. And there's a lot of teams that were looking for centers that are just going, man, like, I'm not even sure we can get our hands on at this point in time. You saw Nick Bjugstad sign a short 2-year times 175 deal in St. Louis. That's an indication of where we're at. These guys are way further down the board, and teams need, particularly, they're looking for top 6 center help. I can think of 3 teams off the top of my head: Vancouver, Calgary, Philadelphia. That's why you see the Flyers stretch on that 1-year deal for Dvorak. So keep an eye on the center market for one, and then keep an eye on some of these depth defenseman moves that I think are still going to percolate. And one last thing, the goalie market. We've seen a lot move already. I just reported on Ivan Prosvetov going to Calgary. He's likely going to back up Dustin Wolf next year. Capo Kakinen, I reported, going to Montreal, but that leaves San Jose and Utah, to my knowledge, of teams that are looking for goalies. Everyone else, I don't think Edmonton's finding their guy unless it's going to be on the trade market, but the Flyers got Dan Vladar. Columbus has Jet Greaves that's going to back up Elvis Merzlikins. Jake Allen stays in New Jersey. Ottawa has Levi Marilainen. That leaves Utah and San Jose. Those are the 2 teams I'm keeping an eye on. And who's still out there? Alexander Georgiev, Vitek Vanacek, Anton Forsberg, Ilya Samsonov. So just a few of the guys that are in the mix jockeying for these last couple spots. It's like Hunger Games here for some of the last goaltending positions to go around in the goalie annual game of goaltending musical chairs.
And that's an interesting predicament, because a lot of those guys you named, it's like they aren't technically like true backup. Like they have had potential to be number ones at certain points. So it's like, how much money are they going to make on this market? After you see like your top tier and you have your maybe bottom tier, this is kind of like a mid-tier market right now.
And that's all that it ever really was to begin with, right? Because you had Jake Allen, who was kind of the belle of the ball. He never even makes it to market anyway. On the trade front, the Columbus Blue Jackets were maybe thinking about moving Elvis Merzlikins. There was just the few guys that ended up transacting. John Gibson, Mikey DiPietro was an up-and-comer that stays in Boston on a 2-year deal. Like, there wasn't really a lot to go around on the goalie market, which is why a team like Edmonton is sitting back going, man, of all the years to be looking, every time we get to free agency, there's 10, 15, 20 guys that are available that are actually pretty good. Well, guess what? In talking to some of the bigger goalie agents the last few days, they're like, dude, I got nothing for you, because all the guys that we have all signed multi-year deals because no one wanted to be in this predicament 1 year from now again. So the goalie market, extremely thin. Edmonton still looking on the trade front, and Utah and San Jose, what are they going to do?
Right. It's like the writing was kind of on the wall last year with just Sturkin and Swayman and Allmark moving, just kind of all these big names going and setting a certain market and wanting more of the cap percentage as opposed to the like AAV straight up or whatever it is. It's just kind of, it altered the goalie market a little bit. They saw the cap rising ahead of time and got in there. So now it's really interesting there for sure.
Yeah. And then you think about next year's market, because I remember, Sarah, everyone was starting to get excited about what does the 2026 free agent market look like. And then you have Thatcher Demko go and re-sign with the Canucks this morning, 3 years times 8.5. Just another potential big chip already off the board way ahead of time. That's kind of the story of the NHL. If you've got players, you're doing everything you can to keep them.
Yeah, we sure saw that with Bill Zito yesterday, and now how all of this is shaking out. But there definitely are still a bunch of enticing depth players left and things to discuss there. I mean, you look at kind of who's left on these lists. I mean, Connor Sherry might sign somewhere. You got, who else? I mean,
name random forward.
Yeah, I'm like, how can we can go around and name player after player, but it is interesting to see how this is going to kind of inform the market for all players going forward with the cap rising when it comes to depth players. So I'm definitely waiting to see.
I was just gonna say one like little thing to think about as well. When you saw Corey Perry go off the board, there's still some like vet grinders that are looking for deals as well that have been pretty productive. Max Pacioretty in a limited run with the Toronto Maple Leafs last year due to injury. We've talked about Brent Burns and the Hurricanes previously. And then what about James Van Riemsdyk, who very quietly had a 16-goal season and finished strong for the Blue Jackets, nearly touching 40 points on a deal that was less than $1 million. Those over 35 guys, if you're talking about keeping your powder dry as a general manager, I think you could do a lot worse, than going out and grabbing one of those guys on a short-term, short money deal that allows you to inject not just some leadership, but also obviously with all of them, some productivity as well that you can really rely on year in and year out.
Right. Do you think the Miller trade we're still waiting for the return on that kind of impacts re-signing with the Hurricanes and Burns, or you think he's elsewhere now?
I think it probably, it's not going to help for sure, but my thought process would be that he wasn't probably looking for crazy term or dollars anyway. You're at 40 years old, you're talking about a 1-year deal. So my guess would be that it probably doesn't have as big an impact as you think, that if he's willing to play in a sort of lesser role where his lineup and presence and ice time might not be guaranteed on a night-to-night basis, if he went into that eyes wide open, that I think there would be a spot for him with the Canes.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with a guy like Rod Brind'Amour waiting to play him. That kind of is a good fit there. All right, things are continuing to heat up here. Does the chat have any urgent questions right now? Let's go to the chat.
I was going to say on that front, Sarah, we were talking about veteran forwards. We just saw Brandon Tanev get the term and the money that he got from Utah, right? So I think it'll be interesting to see how this market shapes up, because as things start to dry up, those reliable presences, as Frank said, those become even more reliable. And as we talked about before, teams are trying to get bigger, trying to get more physical for the playoffs. Brandon Tanev made a lot of sense to be able to get that type of term. So we'll see. It's going to be these next couple hours as we get a lot of the stuff that has probably already been negotiated and probably already been signed, actually finalized, or we're going to really start to see how this market shapes up.
Yeah. Frank just informed us that it's going to be a busy hour and we'll be here for you. And he just left the chat. So I feel like I love that that's kind of like a little insider thing, that something's afoot. Something's going to happen.
Give us the Keandre Miller details.
I was going to say, I'd be curious too. He was saying about the center market right now. I was looking, I think depends if teams consider him a center, but Mikael Granlund can play wing, can play center. Maybe a team, he gets a big payday here if they do see him as a 2C. He's like the only kind of name I could see that could actually fit a top 6 center role still available.
I think people are like discouraging me from liking Granlund. I don't care. I love him. I have always loved the way he plays. He's a great low-key defensive forward too. Mm-hmm. He held his own in San Jose with more time on ice, more room and space. You know what I mean? Like a player can go there and totally sink, but he just kind of held down the fort. I really love his game. I love him as maybe teams see him more like a trade deadline acquisition, but why not just get him and let him cook for a second? So maybe that's kind of the holdup too, where it's like, what's the market for the players that are more trade deadline acquisition-y right now? Mm-hmm. They might be expecting higher paydays, maybe more term. It's interesting what Frank was saying about we were expecting Marner to have lesser term. I think I was too. When you think about the cap rising and then everybody just kind of wants to get locked down, I'm a little puzzled by that, guys, that it's just you're seeing all these long-term deals where it's like, do guys not want to bet on themselves, or is it just kind of about job security?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned with Mikael Granlund, I'm going to be fascinated to see what term he gets, because it seems like he's kind of already been on prove-it situations with San Jose and Dallas, and of course all the teams he was traded to before that, like Pittsburgh and Nashville. So I like you said though, I love the way that Granlund plays. When he was in the playoffs for the Stars, I thought he was just super versatile. He was somebody I was gonna mention to John as a potential Leafs fit, I thought, because especially with that center situation with Tavares, he's been great before, but he's better versed on the wing. But if you have Mikael on the left wing, that's still a point of need for the Leafs. So I think Carolina, like has been mentioned before, would also also fit pretty well if they wanted to have more stability up the middle, if they wanted to play him that way, or on the left wing. I think that versatility, that way that Granlund could play pretty much any position and get pretty good results from it, is going to be pretty valuable in this market when there is no centers to talk about, especially if Pia Suter ends up re-signing with Vancouver, especially.
Getting Suter back in Vancouver would be kind of, we have to praise the Canucks, which I was not prepared to do.
No, I was gonna say Jordan. Yeah, Granlund's in the Leafs. I was not looking at the screen when I said that, by the way. Sorry, Jordan. But yeah, it makes sense for the Leafs. I think a lot. I mean, they already went for Michelli, who's kind of more of that perimeter playmaker, so maybe that kind of leaves them out of it. But I think for Toronto, they have some money to spend. I mean, they didn't re-sign Marner, so they have about $12 million that they might have been locked up to before that they have to be able to work with. So Toronto's a team that hasn't done much in free agency so far. So it's been mostly through the trades, getting Waugh, getting Michelli, of course. But I think there's still some holes in that middle six, especially on the wings. That's a position I really want to see Toronto improve upon with the speed there. So a player like Granlund, I think would fit pretty well, though I don't know how much he wants to actually go to Toronto. I think he'd much rather go to a team like Carolina.
Wow, what a time to be alive where that sentence is uttered. But
right? Well, it's just the Finnish mafia between Dallas and Carolina, so it makes sense.
That's a good point.
The good news with the Finnish mafia is growing. I mean, it's kind of like the mafia is fighting between Dallas and Carolina. It's like it's who would have thought when it's kind of like big players from Finland going to.
It's all the southern teams too. It's Dallas, it's Carolina, it's Florida. Yeah. Florida is a little bit of an underrated Finnish mafia, so you got the territories all down there in the south.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the Leafs, it's kind of like I've been mulling over the Marner situation so now we have all the time in the world to do so. But it's like we knew that was happening, and now they can kind of like exercise their demons a little bit. It stinks to lose a 100-point player, right? But the kind of writing was on the wall, and now they can do something like they have a few options with their 2C, with their whole playing field where they can kind of alter it the way that they want to go in whichever direction they want to go in. So it'll be telling to see what they really want to do. I like Granlund to the Leafs. I think he could, like you said, like he can handle the 2C situation, and people wouldn't be, I could see Leafs fans now kind of moaning and groaning about that, but I think it would be a sneaky good move that gives them some grit and some skill at the same time. So,
well, I was going to say, too, for that center situation, I mean, you don't even have to put Tavares on the wing. You could just do Granlund as the 2C, Tavares as the 3C, then have Waugh as the 4C, and then put Scott Laughton on the wing, which I think is probably a better position for him anyways. Then you'd have more depth on the left side just because of that. So I think because of that versatility, because of the options that they get in a player like a Granlund, I think that just boosts his value way more than it would have.
Yeah. And you mentioned Waugh. It just is, how often do you have a sign and trade like this and you get an actually like serviceable player who's that good? So where are you guys at on that?
Nick Waugh is, I mean, that was interesting that it seemingly at the start, it was going to be like Waugh and Haig, and I really didn't understand how Toronto was able to pull that off. Waugh, I think, makes a little bit more sense. I think teams should be doing this a lot more. If they have that one free agent that they're really zoning in on and they know it's going to be a bidding war, why not trade just a little bit extra to guarantee yourself the opportunity? I mean, Vegas need to get Marner with the LTIR situations they're going to have coming up in Pietrangelo. Needed to add a lot more to that team. And Marner, I think, could be a really interesting addition for them. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense from both sides when you put it that way. But I like that we're seeing some more creativity there. Hopefully that'll lead to maybe more offer sheets or more trades. I wouldn't mind it.
I'd be curious to know from your guys' like perspective, if you were in Marner's head, what do you think made him choose Vegas? I was wondering about that. Like, there's so many top teams. Why do you think he chose Vegas? I think the success of Jack Eichel and how he was able to transform his reputation, his career in Vegas, just how much he was able to turn everything around there. I mean, it's different situations because Eichel hadn't obviously made the playoffs in Buffalo, so he wasn't unproven in that way. He was unproven in that way, and it wasn't a question about the playoff performances, but just getting to a better situation for him and just his family and just the market there. Vegas is very just fun. That team, I mean, it doesn't have the expectations constantly that a team like Toronto has, but Mitch Marner is, I think, just a perfect fit for what that Vegas team needed. I think they needed more speed, some more unbelievable skill in that wing, and there's very few players that can do it like Mitch Marner can with the speed that he has with the puck on his stick. I mean, he is just an incredible player for Vegas.
as well. I really like the fit. I just think for them, they might need to go for another defenseman now they traded Haig, and also Pietrangelo might be out for the season. But in terms of what they needed for that first line, I can't really think of better duos that I'm more excited to see next year than Eichel and Marner. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's also, they are not loyal to everybody, Vegas, by any means, but they are very loyal and take care of their stars. So I feel like that factors into the decision. I also think there is a little bit of, all right, let's get as far away as possible. He had no interest in going to kind of contenders on the East Coast. I do think there's a little bit to that. And I think it's also just kind of, the Golden Knights are kind of a more happy-go-lucky team in which they don't always have the best regular season in the world, right? And but they do what it takes to win in the playoffs for the most part. They've gotten to the promised land. They've had so much success in so few years as a franchise. They have proven over and over again that they will do what it takes to win. And I was questioning, because I know Bruce Cassidy, I knew him in Boston, just kind of a tough coach to play for when you're kind of what people think Marner is. But I think Marner will surprise us with his personality a little bit when he moves on from Toronto, where we forget this guy's a Selke finalist, right? He's a really good defensive player. He isn't just a guy that is expected to get up points. He has one of the best two-way games in the league. It's what makes him have time in puck possession in the first place to score these goals and make these assists. So I would love to see him coached by someone like Bruce Cassidy. I feel like Bruce Cassidy gets him in his defensive game in a way that it took me a second to be like, wait, I thought the opinion on Marner is that maybe he's a little soft or something like that. But then when you come down and think about it, it actually is, he's awesome at defense, and he's a two-way player. And I'd like to see him there's still pressure to win, but with the right tools and maybe the right cast around him and a little less cursed of a team to do it with. Yeah. Like, the bounces go Vegas's way. You saw the first round against the Wild. They were not winning the even strength game whatsoever, but they got those calls, they got the power play goals, and just like that, they're on to the second round. I mean, they got some work to do, but Mitch Marner helps them do that work. So I think that's a perfect fit there.
I was going to mention for Cole, the Red Wings, we got the confirmation of signed Jacob Bernard Docker. Is the cup parade on?
I mean, it's an upgrade on Justin Holl, right? Like,
I mean, that's a low bar for sure, but I agree. I agree.
It's a move in the right direction, I'd say. Very slow, but
all right.
I was going to say too. Sorry. Is this? James Van Riemsdyk.
Oh, there you go.
You were going to say that sources say that the Red Wings are signing veteran forward James Van Riemsdyk. I love Van Riemsdyk. I think that's just a Yzerman move, though, that I did not want to see. So let's get the resident Detroit fan in the chat to instant react to this one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think we need like another. No offense to James Van Riemsdyk, but like a middling winger. I feel like we have enough of those. I don't really know exactly where he'd even fit into the lineup. I guess this just gives us more depth, but yeah, definitely not one that's, like Grav said, not playing the parade after this signing. That's for sure.
We got enough depth at home, but guess who is here? The person who broke this trade, Frank Seravalli. He is back to speak about this trade, this signing. Hello, signing. All right, you mentioned JVR to us before, Frank, and now he's officially off the board. How did this happen? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was mentioning what a strong season he had last year for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and how he just really came in at the very last second. Remember, he waited until like the eve of training camp to sign. Goes in very quietly, scores 16 goals, 38 points or whatever it was, and was a real solid contributor for 1 year, $900,000. Part of that offense in Columbus that just exploded. And so he ends up going to the Detroit Red Wings, 1 year, $1 million deal plus performance incentivized bonuses. I don't think Detroit's done on that veteran forward front. They re-added Patrick Kane, I should say, yesterday, that we already talked about. But one other additional signing that I just reported on here, the Utah Mammoth signing Nate Schmidt, Stanley Cup champion Nate Schmidt of the Florida Panthers, a 3-year deal times $3.5 million. You knew that Nate Schmidt was going to cash in free agency, and what an amazing sell if you're the Panthers now as you're trying to fill out the very last spots on your roster today. Hey, Nate Schmidt, 1 calendar year ago, bought out by the Winnipeg Jets. Come on down to Florida, sign for less than $1 million. Not only will we give you a chance to win, which they came through and delivered on, but you're going to cash in next time around. So Nate Schmidt, you're still getting paid. You're double dipping next year while you're with the Utah Mammoth. And an interesting piece for the Mammoth to add to their back end that was already pretty stout. There's going to be some legit competition there. Schmidt on the left side. They're pretty stacked on the right side, but they want to make sure that they keep some room for their younger guys like Zuber and the Russian Simashev. That's going to be a big impact piece, like emphasis on big. I'm extremely bullish on what Utah is putting together, and now adding Nate Schmidt for 3 years is certainly going to support that.
Yeah, I mean, the contract might be a little steep, but who cares? Like, that seems to be kind of I just love the direction the Mammoth are going and the aggression that they have, especially they're kind of proving to all of us that they are going to be competitive, they're going to be active, and they're going to get these guys that help their team compete right now. So I'm all for maybe extending Nate Schmidt for 3 years if it takes that to kind of round out the veteran group with this team and show the world that Ryan Smith and the Utah Mammoth are going to be competitive. They're going to be a problem for teams, and they were right there. They had a couple opportunities to kind of sneak in the wild card race last year, and they needed a little more scoring. They got it now. They got a little more defensive. They got a little bit more help there. So it's just I like the way that they're going, and they've been pretty aggressive. No.
Yeah, and they've got some energy. I think like the biggest thing for Utah is they need to be a bit of a harder team to play against, and that's why I really like the Brandon Tanev signing. I know you guys had touched on that already, but you've got all these high skill forwards, right, that can dangle your shoes off and put on a show, but who's going to grind and really do that work? And that's something that Tanev brings. They had a group of guys. Carconi was in that conversation, and O'Brien. But now, you begin to support that a little bit more. And Tanev, obviously, even at this age, has not slowed down one bit. So Tanev plus some energy on your back end. Sean Durzee's got a ton of it. This Utah team is going to be really fun to watch. I mentioned previously, they're just kind of one backup goalie away, as there's some question marks around Connor Ingram, from having a mostly complete team that, with some of the young players, Daniil Boot coming in at training camp, he's going to be challenging for a spot. On the back end, I mentioned Simashev. It's an exciting time to be a Utah Mammoth fan, because not only are you going to have a new look and a new logo on the ice, but this team is going to feel like they're the next iteration of itself that is going to continue to build on the foundational pieces that they've already put in place.
Yeah, and we forget about the amount of injuries that struck this team at the worst times last year, like Sergachev, that he was a great get for them, and then he was injured for so much of the season. So they're going to be back with those stocked right up too, and with all these great moves. So definitely we'll keep an eye out for them.
Look, Utah shouldn't have been in the mix. Karel Vejmelka last season saved their season when they missed 2 of their top 4 defensemen for not 5 weeks, but 5 months. When you take John Marino and Sean Durzi out of their lineup, how many teams could even be within sniffing distance of a playoff spot after that? The answer is not very many. So I think their season, as disappointing as, the sort of totality or the result was, the circumstances that put them in that spot, they entered the year with Ingram as their starter. He had a tough spell, and really feel for him. His mom passed away. He struggled with it and is still kind of going through that process. Vejmelka stepped up in a contract year. He earns a big extension, helps bail them out. They scored goals pretty well. They defended pretty well, but they've got to find a way to transcend some of the averages there to make things work. And hey, how about this? Here's another signing here. Jeff Petrie, speaking of the Florida Panthers and vets and bringing them in, Jeff Petrie is joining the Florida Panthers, according to sources, for a league minimum $775,000 with performance enhancing bonuses. So look, right on cue. I talk about Schmidt leaving. Petrie, older guy who obviously was really talented and lost a step with some injuries, he's going to get a chance to get the Nate Schmidt experience now in South Florida.
I was going to say, Frank, so we're basically going to see Jeff Petrie get like what, like $4 million next free agency then? Confirmed?
I highly doubt it, but you know what? Like, good on him for wanting to go through that another year for league minimum after what his body's been through. It's been a grind the last couple years. So to re-up and go to Florida, that means he really wants it.
Got to be the best feeling to sign with the Panthers. I don't know. I was talking to Marchand a lot at the Cup final, and it was just he was at the Four Nations and just talking to all these guys that were on his team, the Bennetts, the Reinhardts, about how great of an environment it is. You talk to Tkachuk, just this is the most fun he's ever had in his life, even before they won, like when they were going for the Cup. And it's just kind of, when you create this environment, it's not just about the taxes. It's not about even, it is about the winning, but you win because you're in such a great environment. It's such a good mix of vets and kind of players that are amazing now and kind of rehabilitating the vets. So there's a place for everyone. The depth is insane. So, I mean, watch out for them again. The amount of folks that they retained or replaced, it's just, how do you do that? I don't know. You gotta be GM of the year one of these days.
Yeah, I mentioned the idea that a lot of people were saying, hey, when is Evan Rodriguez or someone on their way out? As mentioned, teams that were calling the Florida Panthers yesterday after seeing all these deals go down, they're breaking out their calculators. How on earth can they make all this math work? The Panthers did not seem to be any rush. They seem to have a very certain plan in place as to how they're going to make all of this fit into a 5-pound bag.
The chat here is very upset about the Detroit Red Wings decision to sign JVR. And I get it because, listen, I understand there's a lot of veteran signings going on in Detroit when you kind of want maybe a little bit more. All right, we'll get into this. Thank you, Frank, for your time. And I'm sure you'll be back with a few more signings. Thank you for helping us break this news here and talking to us about it. You've been an all-star, per usual.
Talk to you soon.
So the chat is a little upset about the JVR thing. I will say, guys, JVR, as far as veterans go, he is a really good one. He is not going to be somebody who needs to play 1 million minutes. He's really effective still on the power play. He's that net front presence that I guess you're getting rid of Tarasenko and replacing it with that. You kind of want to see maybe other things happen, and I get it. I want to go to Cole. I'm glad we have the resident Red Wings fan here. I want to go to Cole and get his take.
Well, yeah, like I was saying, I think JVR, honestly, 1 year, 1 million too. I think anyone being too upset is being very, overreactionary. Like, it's a 1 year, $1 million deal. It's not a big issue. I think I don't think we've gotten the dollar amount yet on Cody Ceci. That is one I'd probably be more worried about if that comes in. Anything above like 2.5 or something, it'd basically be like another Sherratt or Justin Holl contract where they're not really providing at all, what their money's worth there. And like I said, for me, I think Detroit, they really have to, do something impactful and get younger. So we're talking about maybe make a Marco Rossi trade, or even if there's any other names out there. We do know Florida, I guess, has to make a move. I don't know if Florida has anything worth poaching, but I think I saw some comments too. People are saying not a good signing for the next GM. So there's a lot of Red Wings fans who already think Yzerman's on his way out. I'm definitely a bit more, I guess, optimistic. I think, if we do have a decent year, he should be okay. But very contingent, I think, on how this season goes.
Yeah, and like you said, this is a small deal. Like, we'll see what he does on the trade market. We'll see if the trade deadline brings anything and where they're at. And, they had some time to cook in the second half and really improved as a team. So maybe he wants to give some of these younger core players an opportunity to step up and then maybe make a few more signs. I don't know. I'm talking myself into the Yzer plan once again. So here I am again. But let's grade some of the top signings of the day before we go into the winners and losers. But I know things are rolling in and we'll still do live reactions on that. But I think it's probably time to take a little stock in where we're at and who has done well and who hasn't. So let's even.
One thing I'll say too, I was just in regards to Detroit, I think after they fired Lalonde, they were like the best team in the NHL, or they were like one of the top, 3 or 5. And I know a lot of people would probably say like not sustainable, but taking it to a different sport, that actually happened with the Detroit Tigers last year. They were the best team in baseball the last half. a miracle run, made the playoffs. Everyone thought it wasn't going to continue, and then they're the best team in baseball this year. So if they can actually continue to play the way they were under McClellan to start this year, they should be a playoff team. There's a big if, but like I said, it's been done in the same city in the same calendar year by the Tigers. So hopefully, the Red Wings here can keep that momentum going.
Yes, I am not as down as I was thinking about the whole trade market in itself right now. I feel as though they could have opportunity to cook there. So we shall see. All right, guys, let's talk about top NHL free agency moves and grade them accordingly. What do we think about Brock Boeser? I mean, the Canucks were able to retain him, and that kind of shocked everybody, and they didn't have to go the full 8 option there, and it was at a 7.5 million AAV. I'm going to go ahead and initially give that one an A-. Where you guys at?
I mean, I would probably give it like a straight A. I mean, in Vancouver's case, yes, the term is a little bit iffy, but at the same time, I mean, this is somebody that wanted to stay there in Vancouver pretty obviously. It was just a matter of term. And I think for the Canucks especially, I mean, I think A- makes a lot of sense. We'll go that with Boeser. I mean, when you go through the AAV, it's for a player like this already. I think it makes a ton of sense. Then you have, of course, the cap rising, and for the Canucks, they just needed to keep some of these top players finally. And Boeser is a great one to do. I know how much that Canucks team just adores Boeser. I know how much of just a character he is in that locker room. So on top of the goal scoring potential he has when he is at his best, it just made so much sense to keep him. It would have been a brutal loss for a Canucks team that already was going to be starving for offense next year. So to me, Boeser was just a no-brainer if they were able to keep him, and thankfully they are.
Yeah, I think for me, I was honestly going to agree with Sarah. I think A- is perfect. They get him like slightly under what his projected market value was. You don't lose a star player, but definitely wasn't like, an amazing team-friendly discount or anything like that. I think it was, very slightly doing them a favor, but yeah, nothing like, the Aaron Ekblad contract we saw, for instance.
Sorry, Nathan, you've been voted off the island. We're going with A- if that's okay with you. I agree. I think the morale part of it, it's like it would have been an F if they couldn't re-sign him. So, and I was expecting an F. So I don't want to overvalue it because I don't want to give like the training wheels to the Canucks, but I will pat them on the back slightly. So Corey Perry to the Kings. I think the Kings just absolutely adore being the Oilers junior. So I think it's a little puzzling, but I will say that taking that type of player away from the Oilers is good in itself. And he made such an impact on the complexion of that Oilers team when it came to being net front, especially with Hyman down. So I feel like that was B. I give it a B. What do you guys think?
This is going to be interesting because I don't know. I was meaning to ask Frank about it, but we can ask him at some other point. It'll be interesting to see. We'll go B for Corey Perry. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Honestly, guys, I was going to say I was going to go 8. I was going to go A+ because you get a guaranteed Stanley Cup final, but B is pretty fair too.
Ticket
but
revenue.
Then you lose. Then you have to lose.
Yeah, true. But top 2 team.
Gavrikov, who signed big term with the Reign. Oh, we got a signing alert. Okay. Oh, here it is. We got the CC deal, folks. The LA Kings have signed a Yeah, Cody Ceci to a 4-year contract with an average annual value of $4.5 million through the 2028-29 season, and Ryan Dumoulin to a 3-year contract with an AAV of $4 million through the 2027-28 season. Is there a third one, or did they just additionally the Kings have signed somebody else that has been cut off? We got 2 here, so we'll talk about. Let's get CC first. So 4 years. 4.5 million. Where are we at on that?
Horrible.
LA is.
Yeah, this is just insane to me. I think in CC's case, if you have him as a third pair defenseman, he's okay at best.
Yes.
Obviously, as a Stars fan, as somebody who likes the Sharks too, seen a lot of him over the last year. I think is pretty decent at blocking shots, pretty decent at stopping lanes. That's pretty much it to me. He can throw a big hit every now and again too, but to me, in CC's case, he's just one that kind of has stone hands to me. Just is hard to project, especially alongside a higher up spot in the lineup, a second pair, first pair type of guy. But in LA, he's going to be behind Drew Doughty. He's going to be behind Brant Clark. So you're going to have a little bit of stability there. Plus Brian Dumoulin, who is also more of a defenseman. I mean, Ken Holland has come into this LA team, and we've started to see what he's wanted to go after. He's traded away Jordan Spence, puck moving defenseman, smaller guy, went after Cody Ceci, Brian Dumoulin. On top of that, Corey Perry, of course. I think in Ceci's case, it'll be an interesting one, but I think that AAV is just insane for a player of Ceci's caliber, at least. LA, I mean, it seems like they're just like the feeder team from the Oilers. They'll take all the old Oilers that haven't been there in a while, but they'll take them on to depth roles in the roster. And of course, Anton Forsberg also on top of that, as Frank's earlier reporting, 2 years, $2.25 million. And I think in the Kings case, it'll be fine. The depth needed to improve, but Cece's not my favorite. I'll just say that.
I will pat myself on the back for calling it Oilers Juniors, because here we are. Yeah. It seems like everybody is getting a $4 or $4.5 million deal here when it comes to the depth defenseman. So I guess that's the market now, but it does feel a little overpay. And I'm hearing that the other signing the Kings have made is the goaltender Forsberg. So Frank told us to keep an eye out for the goalie market. And Cole, what are your final thoughts on these moves before we move on?
Well, I just think even just like comparing the two, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I'd probably rather have Dumoulin just 1-for-1, and the fact that they're getting Dumoulin at a cheaper price. I don't know. I guess if you're a right-handed shot, that just makes you more valuable in the NHL. That could be it. But yeah, like Grav said, watching Cody Ceci last year with the Stars, I wouldn't be paying him 4.5. So we'll see if it works out or not.
Yeah, I will say Dumoulin was still out there playing like half the game when it came to the Devils' first round against the Hurricanes. So he still got it. But all right, let's rip through some of these. Our broadcast is sadly coming to an end soon, so we will go through these grades as quickly as possible, and then we'll get to winners and losers. Gavrikov, this team needed to improve on defense. I think Gavrikov gives them a big improvement. I'm giving them a B when all is said and done. Folks, what are your thoughts?
Very fair. I mean, basically, it seems like it's a trade between Keandre Miller and Gavrikov. I mean, I think he plays, especially in a middle pair role, very competently. You're not going to get, something amazing out of him, not a ton of skill or flash, but he just eats a ton of minutes, does it pretty well with his physical game. I think the Rangers, it was a little bit less than I thought it was going to be. I think it was only $7 million per year. I was kind of expecting more in like the $8 million range. But I think because of that, just solid deal overall. Nothing to complain about that much.
I think I'm going to say what Grav said too. I heard some rumors about being like 8x7, which seemed a bit steep, but I think it's 7x7. That's not too bad. And I think, Gavrikov is very good defensively. And he also a bit of an unsung like offensive game. I think he had 30 points this year. So coming in for the Rangers, if they're trying to get back in the playoffs, should be a decent deal.
Yeah, we got Connor Brown for the Devils. I think that's kind of like a filler move for me. I'll give that like a C+. What are our thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, just put him in the McDavid slot from him.
Lower? All right, let's go lower. Let me hear you out for a second, and then we'll go lower, because I'm in on that.
Like Graves, like Oilers had him at like what, league min, and then the Devils, did they pay him 2.5 or 3.5? $3 million. I don't know, for like a guy like Connor Brown that's kind of like replacement level almost. It seems like a lot of money.
It does. Okay, Tanner Jeannot. That
probably do your first F if you want.
Yeah,
I'm down. Put that F on there,
F,
Sarah.
Someone's gonna get
I've
one.
been too nice to the Bruins. F it is. That's too much money for somebody that they didn't need to pay that much.
F minus.
F minus. Period. Ryan Lindgren, I'm going to give that a C+. We're going to see how that shakes out, right? It has high potential, high risk.
Yep, I would have given it straight C, but C+ also I think is the good grade for it. The physicality I think is something that Seattle could use more of. Just, man, please just rest for a bit. Don't move this entire summer, Ryan, if you can, and just start moving in October, because that's the earliest I want to see you, buddy. He needs to get healthy, but if he does, he'll be able to play some pretty strong minutes. Kind of similar to a Gavrikov type of role.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say Lindgren's definitely a guy that's like eye test people love him and analytic people hate him. His analytics are absolutely terrible. So we'll see which one wins out this year.
Brandon Tanev, speaking of eyes, I am going to give that one a B. I really like that for the Mammoth. He has a little wear and tear, but I think they are getting a little tougher, harder to play against, like Frank indicated. What do you guys think?
I think Tanev, we talked about him a lot on the stream so far, but my goodness, such a character, one of the best dudes that I've seen in the NHL, just in terms of winning people over, just with his personality and how he puts himself out there. And when he puts himself out there on the ice, it's so simple, it's so collected, so mature. I mean, he barely makes too many mistakes out there, but is always solid defensively, puts himself in the right spots, and with the hits that he lays out, we all know what he's capable of. That is exactly what Bill Armstrong wants to go after type of guy. I'm not surprised to see it.
Yeah, I think in the bottom six role, he actually should fit in really well with Utah, help round out that. I think they already have, we kind of see their top six is pretty much set now with Peterka, so Tanev just helping to add that depth to the lineup.
I'm going to let you guys go first when it comes to Nate Schmidt, our last grade.
I'm gonna give it a C plus. I think it's kind of Lindgren tier for me. The AAV is a bit steep, but if Nate Schmidt does what he did this last year in Florida, then I don't think it's too much of a problem for Utah. Like we already talked about, Utah's kind of this farm of being able to get these older defensemen like Oliver Ekman-Larsson after last season, being able to get a Stanley Cup champion a year out of him, and then he goes off to Toronto on a big payday. It seems like they kind of have a factory going of these guys that seem like they're heading towards the retirement home, but then bringing their careers back. I think in Schmidt's case, though, I love the pop he had in the playoffs. He had, I think, 5 points in the Stanley Cup final, too. So if Utah's able to make it, he's somebody that is another one that on Florida that was able to elevate his play in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think almost depends what player you're getting. I feel like Nate Schmidt was honestly a different player come playoff time. He looked really, really good for Florida, especially in that Stanley Cup final. So if you can keep that going here for Utah, he'd be worth the money, but chances are it'll probably taper off a bit without playing for the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
All right, with 15 minutes left here of our stream, we can do a winners and losers of the day. I'll start us off with winners, the fans, and us, because we got to actually talk about way more than I anticipated we would be able to talk about. I mean, and here's another one.
Interesting.
Frank will be here to discuss the news that he has broken. What are your initial thoughts before we bring him on?
I mean, for the Islanders, this is a low-risk move. At this point, they're kind of going in a more retooling direction, but Drouin, if he's healthy, he's pretty sick. It's just that question mark surrounding him.
Yeah, I think this one kind of like grab. I'm curious what's the Islanders' direction, because they trade away Dobson, they get shaved with the first overall, but they haven't really full on sold. So are they trying to still be somewhat competitive, or are they trying to I don't really know where they are right now. They seem kind of in no man's land. But this is a pretty good, I think, value just on its own.
Yeah, agreed. Let's bring on Frank to kind of tell us about where the Islanders are at and what to make of all of this. All right, Jonathan Drouin signed to the Islanders. You broke this news, and we're looking at the direction of the Islanders right now, thinking, all right, they got the first overall pick and somebody who is awesome. It seems like great on and off the ice. They're making trades. They got traded Dobson. They're bringing people in. Where do you think their direction is at right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that I think we still probably need to figure out in terms of their thought process, because you're right. It's like you take a couple steps forward, you sign and add a player like Drouin, who's going to boost a team that really struggled to score last year, and all of their metrics were down, particularly their power play. And then you take a couple steps back when you move on from someone like Noah Dobson. And obviously we know what first-time GM Matthew Darsh was trying to pull off and to bring in James Higgins. And, some people will say, hey, they got lucky with the players that fell in their lap in the draft at 16 and 17, and that may be right. But, guys, the indisputable truth about this team right now is that they're worse off than they were when they had Noah Dobson. So are the Islanders moving forward? Are they moving backward? Are they staying neutral? I think we've still got a few things left to figure out on that front. But with that said, this Jonathan Drouin signing is of basically no risk. It's for limited term. It's for a guy who had a couple very productive seasons in Colorado. And some people have called him the Nate McKinnon merchant. I think that's such a disservice to a really talented player that totally rehabbed his game and his career after some really tough times in Montreal. So he's back out east. It's not in a pressure cooker market, and he's going to play with some top end talent again on Long Island. I think a smart bet by the Islanders at just $4 million a year. And then the other signing that I had just shared previously, Radek Faksa, going back to the Dallas Stars. Here's an interesting one: 3 years times $2 million, which seems to be a little bit more than a team that's incredibly cap strapped would want to spend. I was surprised when I learned of the destination where Faksa was going at those terms. So just something to keep in mind as Dallas, again, they're going to have to figure something out, particularly with the right side of their defense moving forward, because they're right up against it.
Do you think that's a situation where it's like they already have the idea? I mean, of course, they have ideas of what they want to do, but it's like, are they signing maybe with, we'll see what happens after? Or are they kind of, all right, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to make the signing, and then we're going to fire off on these cylinders? Because, I mean, you do have to figure something out to be cap compliant.
Yeah, I would say that, look, there's probably still some alternatives here. Like someone, you might have to cough up an asset in order to get someone to take Matt Dumba off your hands, or same thing with Ilya Lyubushkin. You might keep one of them. Those are your escape routes, your exit ramps, sort of out of the cap jungle that you're in. But at the same time, they want to get better. New coach Glenn Gulutzan announced today they want to be in a spot where they're challenging again in that Western Conference final for a fourth year in a row to break through and get back to the Cup final for the first time since the bubble. They feel like players like Faksa, who are, sort of playoff grinders and warriors, are going to help get them there.
100%. All right, Frank, thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks for breaking news with us and chatting with us. And please get some rest at some point. Maybe not after this, but thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, folks, we're going to transition to our final winners and losers and wrap this thing up. I was saying, I think we and the fans are winning right now because we went into today thinking, all right, Bill Zito signed everybody. The Vegas Golden Knights got Mitch Marner. What are people going to do tomorrow? And nevertheless, there ended up being a lot of movement. Are you guys pleased with today, or is it still like, all right, these are a lot of guys that aren't necessarily like the top dogs that I'm gasping for air about? Where are we at?
I mean, I've still been pretty impressed, especially since we've seen a couple of trades at least. That's the big thing that I wanted to see is, like we talked about before, so many of these teams have all the cap space in the world to work with, and not every team is going to have a free agent there that even works out for them completely. So I think especially for what we see in the trade market, we're going to see more because so many of these teams still have holes in free agency that this free agent class just simply isn't able to fill. So I think because of that, we've seen some teams already swing for the fences already. I like the additions for Montreal, especially if we're going to go get into the winners and losers here. I think for them, not overpaying for one of the free agent centers, I think was a necessary move for them because I didn't want to see them fully rush this thing. They had the opportunity to still keep this team as young as possible. And I think for them, still getting a player like Zach Bolduc, who fits into the timeline well, but also can still play, especially in the power play. I like that a ton for them. If I'm going to go for a loser, though, this is only because of their recent additions over the last 20 minutes, but the LA Kings are a strange one to me right now. I get they want to play a little bit harder, but I think for them, they're losing a lot of puck movement this offseason, trading a guy like Jordan Spence, who I think, even though he's not, this bruiser or anything, is a super smart player with the way he plays the game, especially with both sides, if he has the puck and when he doesn't. And I think for a team like Ottawa, they got a really good ad in him. So I think for LA, yes, they might have better results and a more clear identity in the playoffs, but I think that might sacrifice a little bit of skill up front. And the playoffs never guarantee, especially in that Western Conference. It's all wide open right now. And I mean, for LA, doing that might prove to be a bit of a mistake long term, but we'll just have to wait and see on that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, it's a copycat league, right? But why are you going to be a copycat of the team that only keeps beating you and then keeps losing in the Stanley Cup final? I just feel like they could be a little more creative. And you look at the way, I know they fired Jim Hiller. I know like they kind of moved on from what they had to do after the kind of disaster moves in their last playoff run. But I will also say, you look at how much they had to shorten their bench, and it's because they had no faith in the depth, and they're kind of making these signings that are not really like depthy in a good way. You look at what the Panthers do. Their depth is Brad Marchand. Like, you need to just have depth that's also skill. And there are certain players that it's like you don't have to make a move. You could just kind of make a trade later. So I'm kind of with you on that. Cole, you got any winners or losers?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of a cop-out. I feel like my winner would probably be, if they can we count Florida as a winner? The fact that they didn't even have to,
Yes.
be active today. Yeah. Getting all three of those guys signed in, Marchand, Ekblad, and Bennett. Like, people thought like maybe it could happen, but they're not very good chance. And the fact that they do get it done, super, super impressive work, I think, by Zito. And obviously, I think them being a winner obviously impacted some of the other teams who are probably eyeing, one of those guys. The fact that they took all of them off the market maybe helped some of the other free agents as well get a better payday. So maybe they're thanking them.
I'm going to go losers Ducks. You just kind of, no more Gibson, no more Zegras, no Mitch Marner. What's going on here? Sorry, excuse me for a second. Me coughing because of the Ducks. I don't know. You got Roger McQueen. I'll give you that. I don't see the vision as much as maybe I should. Do you guys agree?
Well, I think you're exactly right there, Sarah. The big thing is the GM change, where especially like 2018, once that 2017 Ducks started to wind down and you started to get the Trevor Zegras picks, like 2019, 2020, 2021 draft, those were Ducks teams. They were building skill. They were building high intensity, high pace with the selections they made. With a lot of those younger forwards, they actually worked out pretty well. You got guys like Trevor Zegras coming in, Olin Zellweger, who super skilled, super small defenseman. But then you have a GM change in Pat Verbeek, who has the complete different side of what he wants in a team. So I think in the Ducks' respect, they're still trying to find that identity. They're still trying to see what they actually are. They're a team that's kind of mixed between two different GMs' ideas of what they want their teams to be. So we'll see what happens. But I think for the Ducks, they missed out on quite a bit this free agency. We'll see if they rebound from that.
I want to say winners Hurricanes because I like the Miller fit there, but I have to see how this plays out. I want to know if they're going to get Ehlers. I want to know what the return is. They historically have been very, very hesitant to give up a first round pick, but they might have the one in play from the Rantanen situation. So if they're able to, at the end of the day, get Stankoven signed long term, Miller signed, and then it's kind of all the remnants of the Rantanen trade, I'm like, they're kind of winning in general there. Am I being kind of biased with the Hurricanes, or do you guys agree?
I mean, I think a lot of the teams that won today were teams that just made trades and made different extensions. Carolina is a great example. Keandre Miller, I think, fits well. Stankoven at $6 million is impeccable. So I think for Carolina, even though I'd want to see them get a little more skilled up front, there's still time to do that. Obviously, Nikolai Ehlers still available, and if they wanted to trade for somebody, they have a ton of picks and prospects to work with. They always have that in their system. So I think for the Canes, I absolutely agree. I love them being aggressive, though. I think that's what they should be doing, and we've seen them be pretty aggressive the last day or so.
Also, winner Nate Schmidt. Wait, keep going. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think Carolina, especially that Stankoven contract, I think could actually turn out to be a really, really nice one. With the cap going up, it was only $6 million. I think he projects to be a legit top six forward. So that probably is their best move of the day, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. I'll go winner Nate Schmidt. I think a $9+ million added to your life after maybe you thought it would be either league minimum or maybe taking a step back in general after your long run. It just goes to show, sign with the Panthers if you can and see what happens later. Because that, as much as I like the move for Utah, I think it's a bit of an overpay.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to go for another Florida Panther situation, let's just say Brad Marchand and call it how it is. I mean, that he went from Boston in a situation that just didn't really feel like it was going to be all too advantageous to Stanley Cups in the future. He goes to Florida, perfect fit. It seems like he's the best friend with everybody on the team immediately. And he signs a 6-year, $6 million deal, taking him until he's 43 years old. And he might not even play that whole time, but he's going to get paid and still in the best situation in the NHL. I think Brad Marchand has to get a shout there.
100%. Older guys stay winning in this free agency period. So that means maybe some teams will be losing in the future, but certainly not the Panthers right now. Do we have any more losers we can think of right now?
I think maybe honestly, just to round it out here, you guys got the Kings and the Ducks. I might throw the Sharks in there with an asterisk, just being the fact they have to spend another $30 million just to be cap compliant. So I thought they'd be a lot more active today, not necessarily in signings, but maybe taking back, bad contracts and getting picks. And the fact that they haven't really done anything, I would like to see them be more aggressive when you have all that cap space to work with. And like I said, they're an asterisk, so they could still do it. There's no reason, I guess, you have to do it on July 1st, but they definitely, there's going to be something that happens. Hopefully they can make the most of it, because I think they have a really, really bright future, especially after adding Misa with that kind of core they've already got with Celebrini and Smith, etc.
Right. You make a great point that I know sometimes it feels like everything has to happen today, or where is it? We're an impatient folk, we hockey fans. But this is just happening so far. And we're hearing from insiders like Frank that this might be a productive summer, but it's going to be like dragged out a little bit longer than what we've seen in the past. And there's going to be trades. So everybody stay woke, keep your eye out for that. Well, so far, the winners, the Panthers made no mistake of getting done what they needed to get done. So we can check them in as a winner. The Hurricanes, we'll see how it plays out, but it's looking great so far. Nate Schmidt and Brad Marchand, no matter what happens in the future, you're set. The losers, the Kings, we've seen this film before and we didn't like the ending. The Ducks, you kind of overplayed your hand and now you're kind of swimming in cap space, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but they want to be competitive and take a step forward this year. And it looks like they're going to have a little more work to do. And the Sharks, we will certainly say with an asterisk, but you could have done a little bit more. So guys, thank you so much for being with us today with our live stream. We are about to wrap it up. This was a very eventful day with a lot of trades and signings, and we did not anticipate it to be of this caliber. But at the end of the day, the Panthers did still come out on top so far, and we will see what else there is that needs to be done. But it's been interesting to see how teams at the top can stay cap compliant, whereas teams at the bottom are kind of trying to use their cap. So thank you so much, you guys, for being a part of this. And thank you to every last listener who stayed and watched with us and gave your takes. I really enjoyed and loved these takes.
I mean, that's the thing. There's still a lot of room to go. I mean, we talk about my favorite team, the Stars. They just re-signed Radek Faksa. They got to make a deal to be cap compliant, so it's going to be a pretty busy summer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, summer's always exciting in NHL. Usually there's things throughout it until about August, and then we got to wait till the preseason.
It looks like that's going to be the case more than ever this year with the cap rising and with the pretty bad free agent market. But we'll see what else ends up happening. And thank you so much for being with us for the past 2 hours. Thank you so much.
Yeah, chat's been beautiful. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Honor to spend this free agency with all of you guys.
See you later, folks.
Yeah, it's been fun.